Chapter 204. Chapter 204. The Three Styles of Black Origin. Guang Yuan said, if a normal martial artist in element gathering tier went into seclusion for a whole month, he would have definitely died. But you brat can actually still manage to open your mouth and talk. This is really strange. He directed a burning look at Ling Han, as if he wanted nothing more to dissect Ling Han to launch a full investigation. In truth, Ling Han had still had eaten in the first 10 days, but he did not have any food in the 20 days after that. Not even he himself had noticed the passage of time. He had merely merged the 5 elemental origin nuclei, and when he came out of seclusion after succeeding, he realized that 20 days had passed. At that time, he was in a very intriguing state, as spiritual qi was his food and helped to maintain his vitality. After a martial artist stepped into flower blossoming tier, he only needed to absorb spiritual qi to survive, as there would be a complete change to his level of being after breaking through to flower blossoming tier, and he would not have to depend on food. Previously, he merged together the 5 element origin nuclei to capture that evasive one, and united with the Tao of this world, which was equivalent to having temporarily raised the level of his being to this level, and so he had entered into this state ahead of time. However, now that he was out of that state, he immediately felt hungry and weak. Lu Yutong fetched some fruits, and Ling Han immediately began to eat. He had to first fill his stomach before eating any meat. Otherwise, his body would not be able to take it. Guang Yuan stared at Ling Han. He kept feeling that something was off. He suddenly clapped his hands, then exclaimed, "That's right. Why has your cultivation fallen back to the first layer of element gathering tier? Previously, this brat was obviously in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. When a martial artist went into seclusion, that was for the purpose of breaking through to a higher cultivation level. However, even if the attempt failed, the cultivation level should not regress even a bit, what more all the way from the 9th layer to the 1st. This was practically unheard of. In the whole world of martial arts, what other person could do that? Lu Yutong became worried. She looked at Ling Han closely, and indeed sensed from the aura emanating from Ling Han's dantian that there was only one origin nucleus there. She instantly paled, but when she thought about the fact that Ling Han would definitely feel worse than her, she hurriedly comforted him. It's all right. With your cultivation rate, it would only take 2 to 3 months for you to return to the 9th layer. Ling Han smiled slightly. He naturally knew his own situation. Though there was indeed only one origin nucleus in his dantian, he was a few times stronger than when he was in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. However, he did not explain as this issue involved too much. Moreover, it was likely no one would believe him even if he did. That's not right. Guang Yuan was flustered as his eyes stared at Ling Han's dantian in concentration, and he said, "You are obviously only in the 1st layer of element gathering tier, but why is that I get such a powerful feeling from you, as if I am facing someone in the 1st layer of gushing spring tier?" The 1st layer of element gathering tier could compare to the 1st layer of gushing spring tier? If he actually said this in public, he would definitely be smacked, as others would think that he was muddled from too much drinking and would attempt to sober him. However, Ling Han nodded internally. Spiritual ocean tier was spiritual ocean tier. After all, his eyes were indeed much sharper. Ha ha ha, how could that be? My eyes must have got blurred. Guang Yuan laughed loudly as he smacked his own head. Pooh! Ling Han almost choked. He had just praised Guang Yuan for having sharp eyes when this guy immediately smacked his praise back into his face. Right, there's a silly brat that came over to look for you a few days ago. He said something about having accomplished the promise of a month. He has to go do something, then he will return to listen to your commands, Guang Yuan said. Oh, that should be Zhu Wujiu. He has broken through to gushing spring tier. He said he was going to go do something? Then, he must have definitely gone to challenge Nangongji to a battle. He was indeed a loyal man. Ling Han nodded internally. If it was not for the fact that Zhu Wujiu had this kind of personality, the most he would have done was pass on the cultivation technique of the silver moon race to him, and not allow him to stay by his side. How could it be possible that anyone random could have the chance to stay by his side and be commanded by him? After eating some more fruit, Ling Han managed to regain some energy. After a while, he began to eat a full meal. Hunyo did not mind accompanying him in eating. As a result, she ate 10 times more than what he had eaten, and this was merely what the little girl did casually to accompany him for the meal. Ling Han excused himself, saying he intended to go to cultivate. He went alone into the small forest outside. He wanted to do a full evaluation of his current power. He concentrated his origin power in his fist, and when he had reached the limit, he suddenly punched out. The power of his punch burst out, and it actually became a solid fist that was the size of a human fist that flew forwards. Pong, pong, pong. In front of him, over 10 big trees were toppled by the attack, creating a plume of dust as they crashed onto the ground. Ling Han drew back his fist, a hint of satisfaction on his face. The strength of this punch was indeed comparable to the attack of a martial artist in the early period of the first layer of Gushing Spring Tier, as if the 10th layer of Element Gathering Tier was the first layer of Gushing Spring Tier. Breaking through from the Element Gathering Tier to the Gushing Spring Tier is a solid leap in strength. There would at least be a 10-fold increase in strength. Then, by the time that I truly break through to Gushing Spring Tier, my strength should be able to compare to the 6th or 7th layer. What more battle prowess? The higher the cultivation level, the more difficult it is to challenge an opponent in a higher cultivation level. However, after merging the origin nuclei, my ability to challenge someone stronger than me has instead increased. When I was in the first layer of Element Gathering Tier, I only had about 5 to 6 stars of battle prowess. With the support of such great strength, then wouldn't I be able to begin cultivating a black-grade martial arts technique? Ling Han was moved. If he was able to use black-grade martial arts techniques at this point, then this would be a terrifying increase to his battle prowess. Let's give it a try. He flipped through the contents of his memories, looking for a cultivation technique that was suited to him. However, because he was aligned to all 5 elements, aside from lightning element martial arts techniques, he could actually use any kind of martial arts techniques. Thus, there was a large variety of choices available to him. Then, I'll use this one. 3 styles of black origin. This is a sword technique that guy, the Sword Emperor, has used before. According to rumors, it was precisely when he pondered this sword technique that he came to form Sword Ray. When he came begging me for alchemical pills, I asked for this sword technique in exchange. It was only something I did on impulse at the time, but I never thought that I would truly make good use of it. He sat down in a cross-legged position and began to analyze this sword technique in his head. This was a black-grade high-level martial arts technique. However, there were also superior and inferior martial arts techniques, even if they were all in black-grade high-level. Some were so powerful they were actually close to Earth grade. If there was a rank from 1 to 10 points to grade the martial arts techniques, then the majority of black-grade high-level martial techniques would be ranked below 5 points, while occasionally there would be a few that were worth 6 or 7 points. However, the black origin sword technique was worth 10 points. This was merely a small step away from Earth-grade martial arts techniques. It could be claimed as the strongest technique for anyone who had yet to reach spiritual pedestal tier. However, the words were complicated and very difficult to understand. Thankfully, though Ling Han was only in Element Gathering Tier, with regards to comprehension of martial arts, he was indeed in Heaven Tier. Perhaps it would still be a bit difficult for him to comprehend Heaven-grade martial arts techniques, but Earth-grade martial arts techniques were naturally a piece of cake to him. What more when this technique was merely close to Earth-grade? First style, Mysterious 3000. Ling Han brandished his sword. His movement was obviously very rough and did not have much force behind it. In fact, it was a bit staggering from side to side. If anyone had seen this, they would likely have fallen down in laughter. The Sword Emperor was indeed a maniac. To actually learn this sword technique when he was only in Element Gathering Tier, he cursed internally. Even with his comprehension abilities of Heaven Tier, it was still a bit straining for him to cultivate this sword technique, which showed how much of a monster the Sword Emperor was. But he was also overthinking Itho. Could the Sword Emperor have mastered this sword technique in a mere day? Ling Han endlessly brandished his sword, and his sword technique became smoother and smoother. After all, this was still an ultimate elite of Heaven Tier who was practicing the sword technique. It would be stranger if this was not the result. Shio, shio, shio. He waved his sword, and a burst of origin power shot out, combining with the spiritual chi of the surroundings, and actually transformed into a few dozen sharp swords that flew forwards in an attack. Pung! The ground whined and shook, and the trees in front of him collapsed in patches. Ling Han was dumbstruck. What a terrifying sword technique. Chapter 205. Chapter 205. Strong enough to defy the natural order. Awesome. Really awesome. Ling Han kept nodding. According to what's depicted on the sword technique, one could be considered as having reached the state of major accomplishment when one can produce a 3,000 blade rain with one wave. One wave from me and I managed to produce a few dozen blades in my attack, which means I have reached around 1% of that level. Still, this power, every blade in the blade rain would be equivalent to a full force attack from me. Even if it was me standing against such an attack, I would only be able to block this attack by transforming the blood-sucking origin gold into a shield. Otherwise, there would be no way to disperse this attack. Merely with this one style. As long as I too have broken through to Gushing Spring tier, then I would be able to defeat Feng Yin in an instant. However, that guy should still have hidden cards up his sleeve, so it would not be easy to kill him. Additionally, this style of the sword technique expends too much origin power. One wave of the sword is equivalent to producing a few dozen full force attacks. If it was not for the fact that the space in my Dantian had expanded by more or less 100-fold, I would not be able to bear such an expense of origin power. The Sword Emperor is indeed a maniac. This guy must also have swallowed a spatial pill when he was young. Otherwise, even if he was in Gushing Spring tier, he would not be able to keep up such heavy use of his origin power either. And now that I think about it, in my last life, aside from the Sword Emperor, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden also had control over endless fires, so she probably must have fused with a strange fire, perhaps even more than one. The Setting Sun Saber Emperor obtained a treasured saber forged from blood-sucking origin gold, and was similarly terrifying in power. And there's also Ma Wei Yang, Ji Shuexian, and Na Lan Tuesday. These three were not simple characters either. They also seemed to have their own secret weapons, and I was the only one with the weakest battle prowess amongst all of them. When I recall it now, they must have come from extremely powerful backgrounds, which was what allowed them to reach Heaven tier at such a young age. I was the only one who depended on the effects of the alchemical pills I concocted, and managed to reach Heaven tier even though I began later than them, and soon surpassed them by a wide margin. This land seems to be a much deeper pond than what I had thought at first. Never mind. 10,000 years has already passed, and all those guys should have become dust by now, so there's no point thinking about it any longer. Ling Han recovered his origin power and began to cultivate the second style of Black Origin Sword Technique 10,000 techniques returned to 1. This was a powerful move and required a certain time period to gather enough power for it. It was as if the user collected the power used in 10,000 attacks and combined them to form a single strike. After Ling Han obtained the Black Origin Sword Technique in his last life, he merely looked it over roughly because he did not have any intention to cultivate this sword technique at all, and thus naturally did not take it to heart. However, now that he had began practicing it, he could not help but pale. Was this really a black-grade martial arts technique? One style produced 3,000 full-force attacks all at once, while another combined the force behind 10,000 attacks into a single strike. The force in these two styles was definitely crazily powerful. Putting aside Earth grade, not even Heaven grade martial arts techniques would be this awesome. How could this be? If it was an Earth grade or Heaven grade, then how could he manage to cultivate it at this point in time? Martial artists in body refining and element gathering tier could only cultivate yellow grade martial arts techniques, whereas martial artists in Gushing Spring and Spiritual Ocean tiers could advance one step further and cultivate black grade martial arts techniques. Spiritual Pedestal tier would mean another step further, being able to cultivate Earth grade martial arts techniques. And only when one cast off his mortal body and broke through to Flower Blossoming tier would one meet the requirements to peep into Heaven grade martial arts techniques. Since that was the case, then it should not be possible for him to cultivate Earth grade martial arts techniques now, what more Heaven grade? However, he had been in Heaven tier in his last life, so he clearly knew the power of Earth-grade and Heaven-grade martial arts techniques. Thus, he was naturally able to judge that the power of the three styles of black origin definitely did not place it in the black-grade category. When Ling Han thought back, it was no wonder the Sword Emperor had such an ugly expression, as if his parents had died when he handed over this technique. He had at first thought that the Sword Emperor would not care about a black-grade sword technique when he was already that powerful. He had never imagined these three styles of sword technique would be so terrifying. Then what about the third style? Ling Han did not continue to cultivate 10,000 techniques return to one. Instead, he worked hard to analyze the third style. Then, he experienced a great shock. The third style was called breaking limits, and the amount of origin power required for this move could practically fill an ocean. According to his calculations, even when he had broken through to spiritual ocean tier, he would still need at least a few hours to gather enough power to be able to perform this last style. This was definitely not used to battle your enemies. A scene appeared in Ling Han's mind. A magnificently powerful elite warrior was faced against a gigantic protective array. He raised his sword and, after a very long time, brandished it in a strike. A flash of light from the blade washed over, and the giant array was destroyed. That's right. Breaking limits was used to slice open protective arrays. In front of such a powerful technique, even an ancient giant array could possibly be destroyed, and it would directly kill off the living beings hidden behind this protective array. This style of sword technique could no longer be judged according to grade. Ling Han supported his chin with his hands, and a pensive expression appeared on his face. In his last life, he had never battled with the other 6 heaven-tier elites because he knew that his cultivation level had merely advanced through swallowing alchemical pills. His battle prowess was also the weakest and least solid of all of them, so he would naturally not bother seeking his own humiliation. However, the other 6 would frequently battle each other, all competing for the position of the strongest. Even though Nalan Tu, Zhishuexian, and Ma Weiyang were always ranked below the top 3, they were still able to exchange blows with the Sword Emperor and not die, or even get serious injuries out of it. Now that he thought about it, they were practically terrifying people. What kind of monsters were those 6? Ling Han could not help but want to go mad. In his last life, after he had reached Heaven Tier, he had spent the majority of his time on searching for a way to break through to Shattering Void Tier. Otherwise, if he had gone to investigate the secrets of those 6, he would not be at a loss like this now. From the broken shards of memory of the blood-sucking origin gold, a terrifyingly prosperous period of martial arts could be seen. And a few dozen years, or a few hundred years after my death, there once again appeared heaven-tier elites by the hundred on this land. This means that I had yet to really grasp all knowledge and understanding of this world. Moreover, there is still such a divine object like the Black Tower, and the little girl's spirit base is also a very shocking existence. Interesting. Ling Han stood up, and once again began to cultivate 10,000 techniques return to one. This was a powerful technique that could be used to battle one's enemies. If he was actually given enough time to accumulate the power necessary for this style, then no matter how many trump cards Feng Yin had hidden up his sleeve, he still had the confidence he would be able to kill the latter with a wave of his sword. This consumed too much origin power. Only after a while, Ling Han again sat down and had to swallow a few pills and absorb spiritual qi to replenish his energy. Sword Emperor, though you're long dead, but if your sect still existed, I would be interested to take a look around there. What kind of place could the Heaven's Sword sect be to actually possess such a terrifying martial arts technique? He practiced for a while, then stopped to rest, then began practicing again, and very soon, the day passed. Ling Han was still mostly concentrating his efforts on advancing to a higher cultivation level now. Only when he broke through to Gushing Spring Tier would he be able to understand the secrets of the Black Tower. Thankfully, this would only require about half a month's time. That's right, though he was only left with one gigantic origin nucleus, the time needed to strengthen this origin nucleus as far as it could go was threefold the time he had spent previously. On the next day, Lu Yutong once again gracefully arrived. Let me tell you a piece of good news. Feng Yin has left the academy. It seems he's gone to ask for some kind of spiritual medicine that will allow Feng Luo's arms to be as good as new, she said. Ling Han was dumbfounded. Could this Feng Luo really be born in the year of the cockroach or something like that? In the past, he thrashed and smacked him so much that he had even lost his whole mouth of teeth. However, not long after, he would go back to acting all high and mighty. Now, he had even chopped off his arms, and Feng Luo still had the chance to recover. Fuck. Has his arms been reattached now? They were reattached, but they're not very nimble. There is no way for him to exert any strength through his arms, and that's why Feng Yin has gone off to seek a spiritual medicine to help him recover, Liu Yutong said. This was indeed a very dutiful elder brother. Pong, pong, pong. A knocking was heard from the doors, and Hu Niu ran over to open them. Soon, she came back leading a person behind her. It was Zhu Wujio. I broke through to Gushing Spring Tier 7 days ago and fulfilled the promise I made with you. However, from the looks of things now, I am not able to become your follower. I can only repay you in my next life. Zhu Wuju said. Why? Ling Han asked. I sought Nangongji out for a challenge and crippled his Dantian. Soon, the academy will have me captured. Even if I am not sentenced to death, my cultivation will still be crippled. Zhu Wuju said calmly, no hint of fear or regret on his face at all. Chapter 206. Chapter 206, Arrest. Ling Han laughed and said, just a small thing like that? A small thing like that? Putting aside the issue of Nangongji's identity, the rules of the academy clearly stated that spars were acceptable, but crippling injuries and deadly attacks were strictly forbidden. Anyone who broke the rules would be harshly punished. Additionally, there was the issue of Nangongji's identity. He was the young master of a middle-class clan, and furthermore had an elder brother who was a true disciple. How could the Nangong clan simply let the matter go? Zhu Wujio was a very solitary character. Anyways, he was all alone with no family. If they wanted his life, they were free to claim it. Either way, he had already crippled Nangongji. For a martial artist, crippling his cultivation was no better than killing him directly, especially in those bigger clans. The status of a crippled martial artist would fall dramatically in his own clan, and anyone was free to come over and give him another kick while he was down. That strong disparity in his treatment would be enough to cause anyone to commit suicide. Obviously, Zhu Wujio had the ability to kill Nangongji, yet he had only crippled the latter's cultivation to allow Nangongji to experience that colossal disparity and give him a worse punishment. Just stay here for now, and I'll see who dares to come capture you, Ling Han said calmly. What a boastful tone. When the people sent from the discipline committee of the academy arrived, would you really dare to jump out? So what if you did dare to jump out? For a mere martial artist in element-gathering tier, wasn't that merely overrating yourself and attempting to do the impossible? But when he thought about it, Ling Han was well-intentioned, so Zhu Wuju nodded and said, thank you, but I was the one who caused this trouble, so I will definitely not drag you into it. Ling Han merely smiled. If he continued to say anything more, it was likely Zhu Wujio would think that he was bragging. He had no intention to be looked down upon by a descendant of the Silver Moon race. Brat, a lot of people are here. Guang Yuan arrived in a leap. He had heard the commotion and recalled the fact that he was now Ling Han's bodyguard, and so naturally came to inform him and stood on one side to watch. They're here to arrest me, Zhu Wuju said calmly. He had already fulfilled his heart's desire, so he was absolutely unconcerned about whether he lived or died anymore. That's right, here to capture you. A group of 10 walked in. The one in the lead was a young man who looked to be in his mid-20s, and there was arrogance and rage in his expression. The captain of Team 4 of the Discipline Committee, Nangong Xing. He was also Nangongji's elder brother, and in the third layer of Gushing Spring Tier. He was of course furious. Zhu Wuju actually dared to cripple his younger brother's Dantian. This was a challenge to the authority of the Nangong clan, and also a harsh slap to his face, making him feel the urge to commit murder. Since you already know, are you not going to submit yourself to be arrested? Nangong Xing asked coldly. He threw a challenging look at Ling Han. He was naturally defiant. A mere minor character in element gathering tier was actually able to cause waves in the academy and become a famous person in Huyang Academy. Also, according to rumors, even the two extreme beauties, Liu Yutong and Li Xichan, were close to him. His eyes had turned red from feeling extreme jealousy. In his eyes, Ling Han had merely gotten a bout of asterisk good fortune and had merely obtained the prestige he had now because of Feng Yin. Moreover, if it was not the fact that he was so extremely fortunate and was rescued by the headmaster of the alchemy department who had so coincidentally happened to pass by, this guy would have long been torn to pieces by Feng Yin. He looked at Ling Han, and a cold smile appeared on his lips as he said, "Ling Han, are you going to cover for this criminal?" This has nothing to do with Ling Han. Zhu Wuju stepped out. It was because of Ling Han's help that he had managed to surpass Nangongji's cultivation level and get his vengeance. It was already enough that he could not repay Ling Han's kindness, so how could he allow Ling Han to be dragged down by him into this matter? "You're sensible," Nangongxing humphed. If Ling Han dared to show off at this time, he would not mind arresting one more person. "Aren't you very mighty? Then I'll arrest you and go one round in the academy, and let's see if you still have any face left to see anyone. Apprehend him and drag him back." Nangongxing waved his hand. Immediately, two people walked towards Zhu Wujiu. One of them had a chain in his hands. This was forged from black blood iron. Once a person was chained by this chain, then even an elite of spiritual ocean tier would not be able to escape. "Hold on." Ling Han stepped out and stretched out a hand to block their advance. He said, "This is one of mine. You people want to capture him, but have you gotten my approval yet?" Ha ha ha. Nangongxing was delighted. Ling Han actually wanted to interfere. Then that was great. He was just being troubled over having no excuse to do anything to Ling Han, and this brat actually delivered himself to be stamped on. "Ling Han, how dare you?" he shouted in rebuke. "This is a criminal that the academy has commanded to be arrested." "Wrong." Ling Han held up a finger and waved it from left to right. "Whether it is a crime or not, he should still undergo a trial to be judged. Yet you keep saying criminal here and there. Does that mean you're above the academy? From how I look at it, you're the one who is extremely bold." Nangongxing could not help but be at a loss for words. Then, he said in anger and embarrassment, "Ling Han, you are merely twisting the facts. I am commanded to make the arrest, and if you dare to interfere, I will apprehend you as well." "Hee. If anyone dares to touch one of my people, I would not mind breaking his legs." Ling Han's eyes swept over the whole group, and he grinned. "If you're not scared, you all can give it a try, but don't say I didn't warn you." The expressions on the members of the discipline committee all changed. When they thought about how he had sliced off Feng Luo's arms, according to the academy regulations, this was a crime in no way lighter than Zhu Wujiu crippling Nangongji's cultivation. But this guy was still completely safe and unharmed. Even Feng Yin, who was very influential at this time, seemed to be unable to do anything against him, so no one dared to think of his threats as mere empty words. When he saw the fearful expressions of his subordinates, Nangongxing could not help but feel enraged and humiliated, and said, "This is the Huyang Academy. Who would dare to be above the academy?" When they heard these words, quite a number of people rolled their eyes secretly. There were indeed none who dared in the past, but just some time ago, Feng Luo had already broken the rules and expelled Li Hao for no reason whatsoever. Then, Ling Han, who had sliced off Feng Luo's arms, was not punished at all. When one now talked about the academy rules, it was always with a tone of sarcasm. "Young Master Han, I don't want to involve you," Zhu Wuju said as he turned back to face Ling Han. He would accept Ling Han's good intentions, but could not bear to have him dragged into this matter for his sake. "Nonsense. If you want to battle to death for my sake in future, there would be a lot of opportunities for you to do so. But now, be quiet and stand behind me obediently." Ling Han waved him off and turned to look at Nangongxing. "I do not welcome outsiders here. Would you like to leave on your own, or would you like me to toss you all out?" "Ling Han, don't be so conceited." Nangongxing strode forwards, and his sword left its sheath. He stared at Ling Han for a moment, then said with a smirk, You've gone mad from cultivation, haven't you? Your cultivation actually dropped to the first layer of element gathering tier? With such little ability, you still dare to be so insolent in front of me? Just you watch as I force you all into submission with a single move. Zhu Wujiu gritted his teeth and stepped in front of Ling Han. He also drew his sword and said, Nangong Xing, I can go with you. This matter has nothing to do with young Master Han. Don't force me to make a move. Nangong Xing hesitated slightly. Zhu Wujiu was also in Gushing Spring tier, though his ability was beneath his own. But if he really forced the former into desperate straits, then even if he managed to apprehend him successfully, he would have to pay a heavy price. He was only jealous of Ling Han, which was why he wanted to embarrass him. But if the price for such an act was that he would suffer heavy injuries, he was not as foolish as that. All right. He nodded. Little Jujiu, when did it start that you were the one to make decisions around here? Just stand at one side. Ling Han clapped a hand onto Zhu Wujiu's shoulder and pulled him back. His characteristic of covering for his own people was fully activated. He waved Nangong Xing off and said, Get lost quickly. Don't say I'm bullying you. Find someone stronger. Fuck. Nangong Xing was so angry his whole face was twisted. Chapter 207. Chapter 207. Blind. He was merely in the first layer of element gathering and actually dared to be so arrogant? Did he think that just because he had exchanged a few moves with Feng Yan, he was already in Gushing Spring tier? Nangong Xing did not believe that in the slightest. He only thought it was merely those who had witnessed the scene had exaggerated what they had seen, and the rumors had increasingly distorted the truth, which had led to such a preposterous idea. Element gathering tier managing to oppose Gushing Spring tier? Pay. Nangong Xing said icily, Since that is the case, then don't blame me for being forceful. You are protecting a criminal that the Academy has issued a warrant for, so your crime is the same. I am the captain of Team 4 of the Discipline Committee and am under the command to make the arrest. If anyone dares to stop me, I have the special privilege to kill all in my way. Lu Yutong stepped out. She thought that Ling Han had failed in his attempt to break through and his cultivation level had regressed back to the first layer of element gathering tier. So how could she simply watch as Ling Han went to battle against an elite martial artist in the third layer of Gushing Spring tier? Ling Han laughed and pulled her to one side. He said with a smile, Didn't you see that even Big Brother Guang did not step out? What are you in such a rush for? I can easily take care of such a minor character. That's right. You can just hand over such a minor character to the brat, Guang Yuan said casually. There's something a little strange about this brat. No, something very strange. He kept feeling that there was something off about Ling Han. Though he did indeed only have one origin nucleus, but for some reason, the feeling he sensed from Ling Han had far surpassed element gathering tier. Hearing him say so, Lu Yutong finally calmed down slightly and obediently stepped to one side. She believed that with a powerful martial artist and spiritual ocean tier here, even if Ling Han did come to be in any danger, Guang Yuan would still be able to save him in time. Zhu Wujiu had still kept his head raised high. One should be responsible for what he had done. Yet he was once again flung to one side with a smack from Ling Han, and stared at Ling Han sullenly. An underling like you is really blind. Can't you see that I'm going to show off my might? Do you want to snatch a chance to show off like this from me? Just look at Big Brother Guang Yuan. He's much smarter, Ling Han berated jokingly. Pay! Guang Yuan immediately spat in scorn. He only felt it was beneath him to make a move. A junior merely in the third layer of Gushing Spring tier. One finger from him would be enough to force him into submission. But from Ling Han's words, this lack of action from him was supposedly him being obedient, making him irritated. Are you done with your chit-chat? Nangong Xing asked through his gritted teeth. This was the Huyang Academy, and the Discipline Committee had the highest authority here. Yet these two people actually dared to banter and joke around in front of him. That was disregarding and disrespecting him too much, wasn't it? Are you in such a rush to get thrashed? All right, come on then. Ling Han crooked his finger. Ling Han, this had nothing to do with you in the first place, Nangong Xing said darkly. But you are the one who insists on being such a busybody. People like you usually die very quickly. Is that any of your business? Ling Han gave him the middle finger. Fuck. Nangong Xing could not hold himself back anymore. He suddenly leaped forwards and struck with a stab. The cold light of the sword flickered like lightning, shooting towards Ling Han's chest. Ling Han smiled calmly. He gave a casual grab, and it was as if Nangong Xing was cooperating with him as the blade of his sword was successfully caught in Ling Han's hand. Everyone was astonished. With Nangong Xing's ability in the third layer of gushing spring tear, his sword should be like a lightning strike. Ling Han should not be able to even see its trajectory, what more grab it with his bare hand. However, what use was there for him to grab onto it? The power of the third layer of gushing spring tear was instilled into the sword, and he only needed to give it a light tremble and he would be able to slice off Ling Han's fingers. You are looking for death. Indeed, Nangong Xing humphed coldly and was just about to twist his sword. But his expression immediately changed, because it was as if the sword in his hand was firmly rooted in Ling Han's hand. No matter how much strength he used, it did not move in the slightest. How could that be? He was merely in the first layer of element-gathering tier. How could he possibly have such terrifying strength? Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Let me give you a warning. Let go of your sword to avoid a little bit of suffering." Hung, if the sword exists, so does the swordsman. If the sword dies, so does the ah. Nangong Xing was still trying to be brave and say a few beautiful words when he suddenly released a shrill scream and hurriedly let go. There was actually a patch of bright red on his palm visible, as if he had burnt his palm. This was because Ling Han had made use of his strange fire and had transmitted the high heat through the blade. Thankfully, it had passed through the blade. Otherwise, if he was directly burnt by the strange fire, his whole palm may be burnt into charcoal. Nangong Xing glanced around, and everyone was looking at him strangely, causing him to flush uncontrollably. He stared at Ling Han and asked, "Ling Han, do you insist on shielding this person? Is there something wrong with your ability to understand? He is my lackey and is under my protection. If you want to challenge him, I will not interfere. But if you intend to use some kind of unjust means to bully my lackey, then don't blame me for being aggressive." Ling Han said, "This person has crippled my brother. Should he not be punished by the academy?" Nangong Xing said sharply, "That only means that your brother got his just deserts. I believe that you yourself should be aware of the enmity between him and Nangong Ji. If you want to get your revenge, that's fine. Zhu Wujiu can accept your challenge. Yet you want to use your connections as an intimidation tactic? Get lost." Ling Han said coldly. "Ling Han, what you're doing now is opposing the Hu Yang Academy." Nangong Xing spat out word by word, his face ashen. Ling Han shrugged and said, "So what if I am? Anyways, even if more elites come, there would still be Big Brother Guang here." Hey. When did I say I wanted to help you oppose the elites of Hu Yang Academy? Guang Yuan waved his hands hurriedly. Big Brother Guang Yuan is really modest. Isn't it just a small matter of stretching out a hand for you? Ling Han said with a smile. However, Guang Yuan kept shaking his head in refusal. The Hu Yang Academy had powerful martial artists of spiritual pedestal tier in their ranks. Only if he had gone crazy would he dare to step out to oppose this kind of existence. Yet Nangong Xing still knew that he was not able to apprehend Zhu Wujiu at this moment, so he said hatefully, "This matter will not be settled so easily. Ling Han, even if the academy does not pursue the matter, my Nangong clan will not give up." "Are you threatening me?" Ling Han's eyes frosted over. "So what if I am? The thing I hate most is being threatened." Ling Han walked towards Nangong Xing. "Against such people, my usual procedure is to thrash them till they submit. You may be too confident in yourself." Nangong Xing smirked. "I don't know what means you used just now, but after I have experienced a loss, I will not fall to the same trick a second time." "Is that right?" Ling Han drew his sword. He could take advantage of this chance to try out the power of the Black Origin Sword technique. Hopefully, he could control his power and avoid crippling Nangong Xing with a single strike. Give me a sword. Nangong Xing stretched out a hand to one side, and immediately someone drew his own sword and handed it over to him. With a flourish of the sword, he said, "Then let me show you the might of the 7 wonder sword technique of my Nangong clan." Ling Han laughed and held his sword level. The tip of the blade was slightly lowered, and suddenly, one wave of power after another spread out from the tip, as if a pebble had been cast into a lake, creating ripples. The waves spread out, and Guang Yuang, who had been wearing an absent-minded expression, immediately became solemn. Then his expression changed dramatically, and he looked extremely shocked. He had not seen the real might of this sword technique yet, but just looking at the stance, he experienced the feeling as if a storm was coming. If this technique was used, it would definitely be earth-shattering and incomparably terrifying. What kind of sword technique could this be, and how could it actually appear in the hands of a martial artist in element-gathering tier? A layer of cold sweat immediately appeared on Nangong Xing's face, and beads of sweat continuously dripped down his face. His body was trembling, as if he was about to fall apart. Chapter 208. Chapter 208. Kenyi. Reverie _ The opponent was already subdued without unleashing the attack. Nangong Xing didn't dare to move a single bit. He felt as though if he were to move slightly, it would incite an attack like a thunderstorm from his opponent, and he definitely wouldn't be able to block it. This perception of it made him completely hopeless. His opponent was only a mere element-gathering tier, but how could he pressure him so utterly? Ling Han unleashed his sword with a slash. 9 swords made of origin energy shot up into the air like the rising sun, radiating and harsh to the eyes. Nangong Xing's body was instantly struck flying, and he fell onto the ground with a thud, blood oozing out from his chest. Guang Yuan's eyes, opened wide, clearly saw the strike this time. Ling Han's attack sent out 9 sword lights, and each sword light condensed from spiritual qi into a sword of origin energy. This was a bit surprising, but it wasn't unacceptable. What was surprising was that the power of each sword of origin power reached the level of Ling Han's full-strength attack. In other words, in that instant, it was equivalent to 9 Ling Hans attacking Nangong Xing. How could Nangong Xing block it? He couldn't help but think, if it were him, how would he fend off this attack? The answer surprised him could only rely on power that far surpassed Ling Han's and send Ling Han flying with attacks covering a large area so as to avoid confronting the attack head-on. In short, at the same tier, he wouldn't be able to block this strike. How could it be so terrifying? Cough, cough. Nangong Xing fell onto the ground, spitting out blood continuously. Ling Han already held back in his attack, but it still heavily injured him. The others were speechless. Was this really the cultivation of first layer of the element gathering tier? The first layer of the element gathering tier could be this fierce. Ling Han sheathed his sword and said dismissively, "Take him away. Don't let him lie here like an eyesore." Nangong Xing let out a hacking cough, and another mouthful of fresh blood came out. So he didn't even count as an opponent in Ling Han's eyes. As he was carried away by the masses, his gaze was fixed on Ling Han. This definitely won't be over so easily. It definitely won't. Young Master Han, Zhu Wujia didn't know what to say. Although he was moved that Ling Han shielded him, he saw it as pointless. How could an element-gathering tier martial artist go against Huyang Academy? He certainly disobeyed the Academy's rules. If you exploited your strength to act violently, then I obviously wouldn't help you. Ling Han looked at him and continued in a dignified tone, but Nangong Ji deserved to be punished, so I support you on this case. Zhu Wujia grit his teeth. If the Academy sought someone to blame, he would definitely take on all the charges and not involve Ling Han. Guang Yuan watched in amusement. According to his previous impression, Ling Han was just a nouveau riche that brandished money to such extreme degrees that earth and water faction could only lower their head. Now, it appeared that this guy was also hot-headed, daring to confront Huyang Academy head-on. Could earth and water faction even compare to Huyang Academy? However, this guy seemed to also have a strong network even the Imperial Guards had to give him face. It was not as though he were completely reckless. He couldn't help but let out a smile. This youngster was interesting. and he wanted to see how Ling Han would handle things hereafter. Ling Han suddenly turned his head and looked far away. A youngster approached, his left shoulder empty, obviously missing a limb. In Huyang Academy, there were only two people who had lost their left arm, Feng Luo and Can Yi. However, Feng Luo was missing his right arm. The person here still had a perfectly fine right arm, so there was only one possibility. One of Huyang Academy's three great core disciples, Can Yi, who Lian Guangzhu personally instructed. Teacher and master, that was a completely different concept. Teachers took the academy's salary, instructed the students' cultivation, and taught what was universal to the academy. What about a master? It was one who imparted with great care their entire life's leanings. The intimacy of such a relationship was like that of father and son. Lian Guangzhu had only one disciple, and that was Can Yi, a crippled youngster. Can Yi approached slowly, carrying a long saber on his back. His gaze was sharp like an exceptional saber unsheathed, which gave the feeling that even if a large mountain blocked his path, he would be able to split it open. He has the presence of a master, Guang Yuan said surprisingly. Can Yi's cultivation level was not worth mentioning, but that presence somewhat moved him. Ling Han also nodded. He was optimistic about this youngster who had the potential to become a saber master. This feeling was something he felt from Sword Emperor and Twilight Saber Emperor. But Can Yi was still too inexperienced, showing only the first signs of such a possibility. That attack just now, it's strong. Can Yi looked at Ling Han with an intense urge to fight. You want to spar? Ling Han broke into a wide grin. This guy's not bad. He already had the thought of taking him under his wing. Can Yi pondered, then said, against that move, I'm only 10% confident of neutralizing it. He paused, and then said, if I study the method of neutralization by pondering it for 3 days, I would have the assurance of 30%. He was quite honest. Then let us battle 3 days later? Ling Han said with a smile. Can Yi shook his head and said, your cultivation level is too weak. I can split you in two with one strike. You simply have no chance to unleash your sword. This was quite honest, but too honest that it was uncomfortable to hear. Ling Han laughed mischievously, then said, let's make a bet. Bet what? Can Yi asked. Let's fight, and if you can't beat me, then you'll be my sidekick, Ling Han said. You won't suffice as my opponent. You're only going to be cut down by a single slash, Can Yi said coldly but with surety, emotionless like a saber. That may not be. Ling Han laughed. Let's fight, and if I get killed by you, then that's my fate. If I don't die, then you'll be my sidekick. Can Yi made him think of Twilight Saber Emperor. Perhaps, one day, this guy really might become the second Saber Emperor. Can Yi pondered it, then said, whenever I attack, I never hold back, and you really will die. I'm not afraid of death, so what are you afraid of? Ling Han cracked a smile. Come, and submit as my sidekick. Can Yi looked confusedly at Ling Han. No matter how he looked, his opponent had no sliver of a chance to survive. He was naturally indifferent, not only neglecting social intercourse, but also life. In his eyes, a person's life was no different than a dog's life. Since that was so, he spoke no more and unleashed his saber. With the long saber in hand, his temperament instantly changed drastically from a cold, crippled youngster into a reaper. Those cold eyes and the imposing murderous spirit shocked even Guang Yuan a little as the latter involuntarily cracked his fingers, feeling an impulse to kill this youngster as he felt danger. Ling Han, Lu Yutong called out lightly of nervousness. Hunyo's eyes shone brightly. Can Yi's murderous spirit made her feel a wisp of intimacy, but when she found that this murderous spirit was directed at Ling Han, the little girl instantly erupted fiercely, growling at Can Yi. No, this opponent is mine. Ling Han smiled and brandished his sword with a move reminiscent of a flower, his expression solemn. Can Yi was certainly strong, even he had to be cautious. Chapter 209. Chapter 209. Getting an underling. It was as if the killing intent emanating from Can Yi had solidified. Even a person with a strong will would shiver at this feeling. Yet his eyes were still very clear, as if they were the eyes of a pure infant, and somehow, these two contradicting auras were merged into one. That was because he was a born saber wielder. He drew his saber merely to defeat all opponents in front of him, in order to reach the highest point on the path of the saber. Ling Han only felt such an aura on the setting sword saber emperor before. This did not mean that Qin Yi was definitely able to become the second setting sun saber emperor, but he at least had the potential to if he was able to develop just like how the setting sun saber emperor had developed. But if he stayed for his whole life in Rain Country, then spiritual pedestal tier would definitely be the highest point he could reach. Ling Han moved his sword very slowly, and because he was resisting the killing intent exuding from Qin Yi, beads of sweat rolled down his forehead uncontrollably. If they fought on the same level, then it was unknown which one of them would win. What more when Ling Han had a much lower cultivation level than his opponent. So, naturally, he was under extreme pressure. But the more pressure he felt, the brighter Ling Han's eyes became, as if his gaze could shoot through the skies. These two maniacs, monsters. Guang Yuan was secretly dumbstruck. A thought rose up in his mind: if he suppressed his cultivation level to the same level that these two people were on, he would definitely not have the courage to battle with either one of them. Merely the aura they exuded was enough to make anyone lose hope. Qin Yi never spoke falsehoods. Xiao, and he had made his move. He slashed out with his saber, and the cold light of the saber swept towards Ling Han like water. Indeed, he would not be giving Ling Han any chance to gather power and use that sword style he had seen just now. In his eyes, as long as anyone forced him to draw his saber, then that was an enemy of his, and he was the type to use full effort against his enemies, completely destroying them. And that meant death. Though his eyes were still clear, with no hint of killing intent, the saber he had slashed out was like the god of death who had raised his sickle, ready to harvest a human life. Indeed, Ling Han did not continue to use that move, because he would be sliced in half before his move was even 1/3 complete and his blood would spill in all directions. But this was what he had expected. He stretched open his left hand, and a black light gushed out to actually become a screen in front of him. Then, it wrapped around his whole body to become a ball. Pong! This slash hit its target, but the black-colored ball was extremely sturdy and it was not sliced open. However, due to the powerful shockwave, the ball and Ling Han, who was still inside, was also flung upwards. Xiao, the ball actually transformed in midair. It quickly stretched open and actually became a large umbrella, instantly slowing down the speed at which Ling Han was dropping to the ground. Like a deity, Ling Han slowly floated down from the air and firmly stood on the ground. The black-colored gigantic umbrella was instantly withdrawn and became a bangle that wrapped around his wrist. With a cough, Ling Han still spat out a mouthful of blood. Though he had used the blood-sucking origin gold to cleverly disperse the force behind this attack, he had still suffered a heavy attack when the slash fell on him, causing his internal organs to jolt, which was a very horrible feeling. In comparison, Qin Yi was really much more powerful. Previously, one strike from Ling Han was enough to defeat Nangong Xing, but now he was not able to even take a single slash from Qin Yi, if he had merely depended on his own power. Though Qin Yi's cultivation level was higher and had reached the 5th layer of Gushing Spring tier, it could be easily seen the level of talent that this young man had in the way of the saber. There was such a way too. Guang Yuan and Lu Yutong were both staring with wide eyes. Even with their sharp eyes, they were still unable to deduce what means Ling Han had used to disperse this attack of Qin Yi's. What kind of spiritual tool was that? It looked very awesome. Ling Han quickly recovered. He had the body of dead tree, and furthermore, with the indestructible heaven scroll circulating in his body, he would be able to recover as long as he was not dead, no matter how serious his injuries were. He smiled softly and asked, "Little lackey Qin Yi, are we going to continue?" Qin Yi stood with his saber in hand, but his eyes were closed. After pondering for a moment, he opened his eyes, shook his head, and said, "No, I am not able to unravel that move of yours just now." Though he himself said he was not able to unravel the move, his expression was extremely calm. It was as if he would experience no joy from winning nor sadness from losing and possessed a terrifying calmness about him. "Then you'll be my lackey from now onwards," Ling Han said with a smile. "Not bad, not bad." He managed to get a lackey with boundless future prospects. He really should drink some wine to celebrate. Kenyi thought for a moment, then said, "When I am able to unravel that defensive move of yours, I will once again challenge you. If you win, I will continue to listen to your commands. If not, you will lose your life." "That's fair." Ling Han grinned. Kenyi nodded and said, "Then I'll leave first. If there's anything, just blow this whistle, and I will rush over at the first instant." He waved his hand and tossed a whistle over to Ling Han. Ling Han caught it and could not help but look at him strangely. "Were you born in the year of the dog? You can actually be summoned with a whistle like a dog? Brat, you're really sly, to actually use such a shameless method to deceive a genius of saber arts." After Kenyi had left, Guang Yuan immediately jumped out and exclaimed at Ling Han. Ling Han pushed him aside and said, "What do you mean by deceive?" "Deceive your sister. I had used real power to subdue that brat, but if you're not convinced..." Guang Yuan laughed and said, "So what if I am not convinced? Unless you want to fight with me and force me into submission? If you're not convinced, the door is there. Just go out and turn right. Godspeed, and I won't bother to see you out," Ling Han said lazily. Instantly, Guang Yuan lost all the wind in his sails. He still had to depend on Ling Han to guide him in his cultivation of the large Sun Heaven Heart Scroll. What more when the large Sun Heaven Heart Scroll he had obtained was not the complete version. He still needed Ling Han to help him to fill in the blank spaces for him. If he really went out and turned right, then everything would be gone. "Hey, I am a spiritual ocean tier elite. After all, shouldn't you respect me a bit more?" he said faintly. Ling Han immediately felt an urge to throw up and said, "Big brother Guang, don't be so sickening." Guang Yuan laughed loudly. He was not a spiritual ocean tier martial artist from one of the clans but a lone cultivator, so he knew when to retreat and when to advance, and was definitely not the type to place his pride over everything else. If it had been one of the spiritual ocean tier elites from one of the clans, they would have definitely left in a huff after being forced by Ling Han like that just now. Then he sighed and said, "That brat just now was really not bad. He's a natural genius of martial arts. Unfortunately, he is a saber wielder. If he wasn't, I would really consider taking him in as my disciple. Thank goodness he is not an expert in using his fists. If you really did take him in as a disciple, you would have definitely been beaten into pulp by Lian Guangzhu." Ling Han snickered. Guang Yuan was shocked and asked, "That brat is Lian Guangzhu's personal disciple?" "Exactly." Guang Yuan was at a loss for a moment, before he suddenly jumped up and moved to strangle Ling Han. "You stupidly bold guy. You actually deceived Master Lian's personal disciple into becoming your underling. If this was found out by Master Lian, he would definitely kill you, and even I will be dragged into the matter." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "That's all right. At that time, I will definitely shove all the blame onto Big Brother Guang Yuan. Who would believe that I, who is merely in the first layer of element gathering tier, would have the ability to accomplish such a feat?" Guang Yuan only felt like he wanted to raise his head and moan to the heavens. He felt like he had never had the upper hand in his exchanges with Ling Han. On the other hand, he was always led around by the nose by Ling Han. He wore a strange expression and asked, "Are you really in the first layer of element gathering tier?" "Exactly." Ling Han smiled slightly. "Fuck, if I believed your words, then I'd be a dumb pig," Guang Yuan exclaimed as he spat on the ground. Chapter 210. Chapter 210, Devil Sky Mystery Realm. Reverie _ One origin nucleus had to be the first level of element gathering tier, no matter where one was. However, only Ling Han himself knew just how large the origin nucleus within his Dantian was, and how shockingly fast it churned. The nucleus provided origin power far surpassing that of 9th layer of element gathering tier, even comparable to that of 1st layer of gushing spring tier. That boy just now is certainly a genius martial artist, but you kid are just a freak of a martial artist, Guang Yuan concluded. Ling Han shrugged but didn't deny it. A heaven-tier spirit entered this body. Of course he's bound to be a freak. Also, this lord has no younger sister, so stop it with your sister crap, Guan Yuan said casually. PFF. Ling Han burst into laughter and patted Guang Yuan on the shoulder, then said, "Who would have thought old brother Guang had such a sense of humor? Not bad, not bad, you've got a good mentality, which will be more suitable for breaking through to higher tiers." Guang Yuan guffawed, feeling as though his mind was really much younger. However, only after Ling Han turned to enter the room did he realize that he and Ling Han were really harmonious, as if the two had no difference in status. One had to know the rigidity of the tiers in the martial arts world. Even a middle-stage element-gathering tier and an early-stage element-gathering tier had a chasm between them. Moreover, the two in question were separated by two great tiers. How could they get along as equals? For example, earlier, when Ling Han patted his shoulder, not to mention an element-gathering tier, even if an early-stage spiritual ocean tier person did that, it would have still enraged him, and he'd send the person flying with a slap, and he wouldn't even care about the aftermath. The life and death of the miserable guy would be based on their luck. He unexpectedly let Ling Han pat his shoulder and had a good talk with him, as if he really treated Ling Han as an equal. This kid's got a weird charisma that made me involuntarily forget his age and tier in cultivation, Guang Yuan concluded, and then muttered, "In short, this guy's a monster." This feeling wasn't Guang Yuan's alone. The eldest imperial prince and the third imperial prince, who had royal blood and cultivation in far higher tiers, still referred to Ling Han as brother, didn't they? Admittedly, Ling Han's background was in play, but his charisma was also affecting the two princes, earning their respect from the bottom of their hearts. Nangong Xing was beaten, and the discipline committee was obstructed. This was supposed to be a big incident, but it involved Ling Han, so it turned from a big incident into a small one. No one brought up seizing Zhu Wujiu again, and of course no one said anything about punishing Ling Han. However, this was only a tacit state of affairs. Zhu Wujiu was fine if he stayed near Ling Han or the latter's quarters, but once he left or became isolated, then he definitely faced the discipline committee's arrest. After all was said and done, this was only to give Ling Han face. A student could receive such face. How shocking was that? Zhu Wujiu and Guang Yuan settled in the courtyard. First of all, they were both men. Second of all, Guang Yuan kept watch, so the discipline committee wouldn't dare act rashly. Third of all, well, Guang Yuan could give some pointers to Zhu Wujiu, saving Ling Han some work. This caused Guang Yuan to bawl in anger. He felt that when he became Ling Han's underling, he only had to be a bodyguard. But why was he now instructing someone's cultivation? In the future, could he be forced to raise kids? 2 days later, Lu Yutong and Li Xichan hurried over. Just from the look of the two girls' expressions, something big definitely happened. Devil Sky Mystery Realm opened, the two girls said at the same time. Finding that they synchronized, they inevitably shot a glare at each other. What Devil Sky Mystery Realm? Ling Han looked confused. Mighty men exist who can sever the area we live by supreme mystical arts, forming a small world that is isolated from the normal world. We call it Mystery Realm, Lu Yutong explained. She knew that Ling Han came from a small place, Gray Cloud Town. Even though he was an alchemy genius, he definitely didn't understand anything about mystery realms. Ling Han obviously knew what mystery realms are, but he had never heard of Devil Sky Mystery Realm. However, with his abilities in the previous life, he was still unable to separate a part of the world to form a smaller world. Therefore, this was definitely only possible for a mighty shattering void tier. Unfortunately, even though he entered many historic sites, he never had a chance to enter a mystery realm. It was rumorita mere rumor that Heaven's Sword Sect Sword Emperor belonged to was located in such a mystery realm. Devil Sky Mystery Realm is an extremely large mystery realm that is hidden in Rain Country and Fire Country, and so on within the 9 nations of the desolate north. It's possible that the entire mystery realm is comparable to Rain Country's territory in size. It is layered in a mysterious way, hidden in the world we live in. Lu Xichan also started to explain, her eyes filled with utter admiration. This was a supreme handiwork that could separate a large space from the real world, layer it, and hide it. The thought of it was bewildering. Devil Sky Mystery Realm's original master died long ago, so the Mystery Realm isn't controlled by anyone. After a certain amount of time, door will appear that will accept people. Lu Yutong followed hand in hand with Li Xichan, unexpectedly well coordinated. The opening time is not fixed. Sometimes it appears once in several hundred years, and sometimes it appears once every few decades, Li Xichan said. The last time Devil Sky Mystery Realm opened was 300 years ago. Devil Sky Mystery Realm has a decent amount of ancient arts and skills, and with enough luck, one may find them. It's said the family that started the 9 nations of the desolate north was the first to enter Devil Sky Mystery Realm, and they obtained large amounts of arts and skills. Subsequently, they quickly surpassed others, rebuilding the desolate north rampant with monsters into one that was suitable for humans to live in. It is indeed so. I have seen my family's historic records with such a written account. There's more. Inside the Mystery Realm there are godly pills. Someone entered as a normal element-gathering tier, but came out as a shocking spiritual pedestal tier. Inside Devil Sky Mystery Realm wait great opportunities. Both girls concluded at last. But Lu Yutong immediately continued, Devil Sky Mystery Realm is not just about opportunities. It's rumored that when the original master of the Mystery Realm died, the master's body was invaded by evil chi, turning the master into a terrifying blood zombie. Every once in a while, when it opens, it's actually because it needs to feed on blood. Yes, that's why there are rules that when people enter, they must head to the Center Hall Suppression Stone tablet and pour some blood on top of it. 1,000 years ago, everyone wished someone else would pour their blood. As a result, the blood sacrificed was insufficient and a blood zombie appeared inside the Mystery Realm, sweeping across the 9 nations of the desolate north. In the end, flower blossom tier cultivators from the 9 large countries showed, giving up their lives to destroy the blood zombie, Li Xichan said. Ling Han showed an interested expression and muttered, blood zombie? He's never heard of a mystery realm like this that required blood sacrifice from those who entered. Normally, when a blood sacrifice was needed, there were only 2 possibilities. First, to nurture a great devil's body with blood, like blood-sucking origin gold. Secondly, to either break or strengthen a seal. Could it be that inside the mystery realm resides the subdued origin gold giant? He suddenly had a bold guess. Chapter 211. Chapter 211, Setting Out. Ling Han had seen a small fragment of that great battle from the memory shards of the blood-sucking origin gold and could confirm one thing, and that was that giant formed of origin gold had definitely been defeated. According to his deduction, that giant should have been dismembered, with its parts scattered in all directions. However, there were other possibilities as well. For example, that giant of origin gold might only have had some portion of its body torn off while the majority of its body was still unscathed. If that was the case and the giant of origin gold had been suppressed within the mystery realm, then it would not be strange for a broken piece of its body to have appeared in Rain Country. Of course, the chances of this possibility were very low, pitifully low. But when he thought about how terrifying the giant of origin gold was, Ling Han still decided to venture into the Devil Sky Mystery Realm to take a look. If the giant of origin gold was indeed sealed within, then he must ensure that the seal was being strengthened and not weakened. So many years have already passed. Even a monster like that origin gold giant should have died by now, right? Ling Han reassured himself in this way. However, in the case of an existence like the origin gold giant, even if it had indeed died of old age, its immortal body could still give birth to a second life, though it would be a completely different person. Whatever the case, there was definitely a need for him to go to this Devil Sky Mystery Realm. How do you enter the Devil Sky Mystery Realm? He questioned. It's very easy. After the Mystery Realm has opened, teleportation doors will appear in various places. Once one passes through these doors, he will have directly entered into the Devil Sky Mystery Realm, Lu Yutong said. She paused for a while, then continued, the reason why we know that the Mystery Realm has opened is precisely because the doors have appeared. 3 doors have appeared in Rain Country this time. The nearest one is 300 miles east of the Imperial City, Li Xichan said. Ling Han nodded, then asked, "In the Devil Sky Mystery Realm, aside from Blood Zombie, what other danger is there? The humans who used to live there have long perished, but there are still some demonic beasts within. Moreover, they seem to be trapped inside, and there is no way to bring them out either. Additionally, we also have no means to stay too long inside. After a certain period of time, we will automatically be ejected out of the Mystery Realm," Lu Yutong answered. "According to rumors, there is a terrifying creature in the deepest parts of the Devil Sky Mystery Realm. That area is forbidden. We will only be touring around the outer boundaries. The Mystery Realm has only appeared after such a long time, so there must definitely be a large number of spiritual herbs that have already matured. They are our main targets," Li Xichan said. Lu Yutong nodded in agreement. As far as cultivation and martial arts techniques went, after so many generations of being harvested, it was practically impossible that there would still be any left. But it was different in the case of spiritual herbs. They could harvest a batch this time round, and the next appearance would probably be at least dozens of years later. Especially this time. It has only reappeared after 300 years, so there must definitely be a large amount of spiritual herbs just waiting to be harvested. What are the restrictions for entering the Devil Sky Mystery Realm? Ling Han continued to ask. In simple words, the lower your ability, the easier it would be to enter. However, every time is different. Sometimes, even spiritual pedestal tier elites could enter, but there were also times when even gushing spring tier martial artists were unable to enter, Lu Yutong said with a shake of her head. Ling Han thought for a moment, then felt that it was all right. Firstly, he had not offended any spiritual pedestal tier elites. Secondly, if even spiritual ocean tier elites could enter, he still had Guangyuan by his side. Thirdly, if only those in gushing spring tier and below could enter, then he had completely no fear. Even if he encountered such elites like Ken Yi and the eldest imperial prince, he would at least have the ability to keep his life. Moreover, wasn't Ken Yi currently his underling? Not long after, the Huyang Academy made an announcement, commanding all students to immediately set off and enter the Devil Sky Mystery Realm. Meanwhile, those who would be entering the center hall to sacrifice some of their blood were given the first priority. If too little blood was sacrificed, then a blood zombie would appear to spread ruin and destruction in the world, and by then, who knows how many would die. Very soon, Qi Yongyi, Li Dongyu, Jin Wuji, Bailey Tengyuan, and the others all raced over to Ling Han's place. They had all come from the Diyuan city, so they were naturally intending to form a group and help each other. Brother Ling, your cultivation level. Qi Yongyi was the first to notice, and could not help but be extremely shocked. Why has it regressed back to the first layer of element gathering tier? Jin Wuji and the others all respectively sensed for Ling Han's aura, and indeed, there seemed to be only one origin nucleus. Disbelieving expressions too appeared on their faces. They had only heard of people being stuck on a cultivation level and being unable to break through for a long time, but this was the first time they had seen a person's cultivation level actually drop to such a drastic level. Ling Han laughed, and naturally offered no explanation. He said, "Since everyone's here, then let's set out." Qi Yongyi and the others were aware as well that Ling Han was very awesome in the field of alchemy. In the Diyuan city, he was already able to subdue 3 black-grade alchemists, and now he was even more awesome as even black-grade middle-level alchemists revered him. From this aspect, what difference did it make whether Ling Han's own cultivation level was a bit lower or a bit higher? They all set out. Ling Han also dropped by at the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion and invited Li Hao as well. It was only then that the group finally left the Imperial City and headed east. On their journey, more and more people appeared. The Devil Sky Mystery Realm was not all about good stuff like cultivation techniques and spiritual herbs. It also required a large number of people to make a blood sacrifice. Otherwise, a blood zombie would appear. Thus, no matter how strong or weak anyone was, it was best to donate a bit of their blood for the sacrifice. This was a matter of national importance, and the power of the imperial family was already effectively in action, maneuvering the citizens of various cities to head towards the Devil Sky Mystery Realm. After half a day, Ling Han's group had finally arrived at the location of the teleportation doors. Rather than calling it a door, it seemed more fitting to refer to it as a standing vortex. There was black-colored light twisting and turning within it, and it was about 10 meters tall. It was an imposing sight. There was no front or back to this teleportation door. No matter which side a person jumped through, he would still immediately disappear as if he had been swallowed whole. Ling Han nodded internally. He had never had the ability to create such a thing in his last life. Only almighty warriors of shattering void tier were capable of that. There were a few who could no longer wait and entered, while others were still waiting outside. They seemed to be trying to gather a group. Once a big enough group had appeared, they would enter. And before each of them entered, they would be given a brand and a map. The brand showed that they were citizens of Rain Country, whereas the map was very simple, only marking where the center hall was located. The people of the 9 nations of the desolate north could enter through the teleportation doors that were scattered everywhere, so it was not just limited to the people of Rain Country. For example, Rain Country and Fire Country were neighboring countries, and conflicts would frequently erupt between these two nations. It was unknown how many had died in these conflicts after these few thousand years, so the two countries have long become deadly enemies. Thus, whenever the citizens of these two countries encountered each other, they would definitely attempt to kill the other. This brand was what was used to identify friends and enemies. It was directly branded on one's arm and could last for about a month, so it was more than enough time. The restrictions for the teleportation doors this time were not too low. Even those in spiritual ocean tier could enter, but spiritual pedestal tier martial artists could not. Ling Han, a voice forced out through gritted teeth, was heard, filled with endless hatred. Ling Han turned his head to look, and couldn't help but look strangely at the owner of the voice. Feng Luo. Did this guy have the life of a cockroach or something? He actually appeared again. Moreover, his 2 arms were indeed reattached, but it was obvious they were not very nimble. It seemed like they were simply glued on and hung at his sides, looking very out of sorts. After all, it was already very impressive that they managed to reattach his arms, but if they were still able to move as nimbly as if they had never been sliced off, then that was practically illogical. Chapter 212. Chapter 212. Feng Luo is killed. Hey! Ling Han waved his hand in greeting. At first, Feng Luo already looked like he wanted to devour Ling Han, but when he saw this, he was even more fuming with rage, wanting nothing more than to rush forward and strangle Ling Han to death. However, he did not. Firstly, he was not strong enough, and secondly, he could not raise his arms at all. In fact, if he actually exerted any force through his arms may very possibly simply fall off, so he could only huff in rage. Ling Han, if you dare to enter the Devil Sky Mystery Realm, that will be the time of your death, he said through gritted teeth. Behind him, the 4 guardian deities took a step forward in unison, looking disdainfully at him out of the corner of their eyes. After not seeing them for over a month, the cultivation of these 4 people actually scurried up another layer and made it to the 2nd layer of gushing spring tier. One had to understand that the higher the cultivation level, the more difficult it was to break through. For example, even for a genius like Lu Yutong, who also possessed the 3 vanishing veins and was cultivating a heaven-grade cultivation technique, and also had access to a supply of alchemical pills from Ling Han, she would only advance by 1 cultivation layer after about 2 months. How could these 4 actually manage to stand on even footing with Lu Yutong? Ling Han remembered Feng Yin. This guy was also advancing unbelievably rapidly through the cultivation levels. Could it be that he had discovered an ancient treasure trove, and even those around him could ride on his coattails and get to the top? The 4 guardian deities were all glaring fiercely at Ling Han. Previously, even when the 4 of them combined forces, Ling Han had still managed to capture Feng Luo right in front of their eyes. Thankfully, even when Feng Yin personally appeared, Feng Luo's arms were still not saved, which was what made their fault just that little bit lighter. But this was still a great shame to them. They hated Ling Han deeply, wanting nothing more than to tear him into pieces to wash off this black mark on their reputations. And the Mystery Realm was obviously a very good place to settle personal grudges. It was much too big inside, and there were always chances that one would be separated from their group, and once they encountered him, Moreover, The people of the 9 nations of the desolate north were also able to enter, so even if they killed Ling Han, they could completely push the blame onto the foreign martial artists. Ling Han smiled, but there was killing intent being exuded from his eyes. The first time he met Feng Luo, because the latter had not displayed any killing intent, he only taught him a little lesson and had not taken the matter to heart. He never thought that this cockroach would have such a long life and would be so annoying. Hunyo stuck out her tongue and made a face at Feng Luo, baring her little canines, seeming very disdainful of him. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Feng Luo, you see, not even my Nyo is scared of you. I really don't know what you're so smug about. Chi Yongyi and the others too laughed loudly. Feng Luo trembled in fury. He ground his teeth, then proclaimed, Ling Han, I swear I will kill all your family members and friends one by one, right in front of you, before killing you. Instantly, Ling Han's face darkened, and an overflowing killing intent was exuded from him. He did not mind playing around with this kind of minor character, could always kill him easily with a single stomp of his foot, but the other actually threatened to kill his family and friends? His strongest character trait was protecting his own people. You're seeking death. He began to stride towards Feng Luo. Ling Han, are you tired of living? The 4 guardian deities all smirked coldly. In their last clash, it was because they had underestimated Ling Han that he had the opportunity to capture Feng Luo and hold him hostage, forcing them to be helpless against him. But this did not mean that Ling Han was able to oppose them in a direct clash. Element Gathering Tier will only be Element Gathering Tier, after all. Get out of my way, smelly pests, Ling Han said coldly, the killing intent exuding from him almost seeming solid. The 4 guardian deities looked angered. This time, you have no hostage in your hands, so how are you going to oppose us? Kill him! Kill him! Feng Luo screamed in spite of himself. As Ling Han approached, he could not help but recall the few times he had clashed with Ling Hanhe was scared off, kicked away, his mouthful of teeth was smacked out, and finally, even his 2 arms were sliced off. As he looked at Ling Han's slender figure come closer, he instantly had a mental breakdown. Kill! Kill him! He wailed, tears and snot pouring down his face. The 4 guardian deities were disdainful of such a hideous display, but who asked him to be Feng Yan's brother? They stared at Ling Han with cold eyes. This was a very good chance for them to act. The one who is going to die today is you, Ling Han said. He moved, and actually charged directly towards the 4 guardian deities. Insolence! The 4 guardian deities shouted in rage. This brat had succeeded once in dodging their hands. Could it be he wanted to attempt the same thing again? Did he really think they were idiots? Ling Han, Chi Yongyi, and the others all exclaimed in shock. They never thought that he would be so awesome and simply clashed head-on with 4 gushing spring tier elites just like that. Hong, 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 Hong. 4 attacks were simultaneously launched and swept towards Ling Han. This time, the 4 guardian deities had all had an upgrade of 1 battle star in their battle prowess, and if the 4 of them joined forces, they were definitely capable of instantly killing any martial artist in the 9th layer of Element Gathering Tier no matter what kind of genius he was. However, Ling Han was not at the peak period of Element Gathering Tier. Instead, he had transformed 9 into 1, and had successfully captured the evasive one, the 10th layer of Gushing Spring Tier. Ling Han used the exiting cloud steps and his figure miraculously broke through the combined barrage of attacks of the 4 guardian deities like a ghost and appeared in front of Feng Luo in a flash. He stretched out a hand to grab onto Feng Luo's neck. Save me! Feng Luo shrieked in panic. The 4 guardian deities were both shocked and enraged. They could not imagine how Ling Han had somehow managed to break through their combined attacks, and a thought appeared in their minds. History is probably going to repeat itself. Indeed, they were one step too late, and were unable to stop Ling Han. They could only watch as Feng Luo was subdued by Ling Han in a single move. Let go of young Master Luo! The 4 guardian deities shouted grimly yet did not dare make a move, just in case Ling Han would do any harm to Feng Luo. This scene was very familiar, causing their faces to burn as if they had just been given a slap. To actually fall for the same trick twice, were they idiots? Of course not. This was because Ling Han was too powerful for them now. Ling Han did not concern himself with the four guardian deities. He merely stared at Feng Luo, then asked darkly, "You want to kill my entire family? Ling Han, you will not dare to kill me. If you have balls, you can cripple my arms again. Anyways, my brother will definitely return to save me. Just wait, when my brother comes back, I will definitely massacre your whole family." His fear had reached extreme levels, and Feng Luo simply threw caution to the wind and stared back at Ling Han with fierce eyes. "Come on, if you have the balls, cripple me again. If you don't, then you are a fuck grandson. Ling Han, I'm not scared of you. You have no idea what kind of power my brother has obtained, not even the rain." Pooh! A crisp sound was heard, and Feng Luo's head had disappeared as Ling Han had smacked it into his chest. Only after a while could blood be seen gushing out from his neck. A dead silence enveloped the surroundings. Ling Han smacked his hands together and said, "The world has finally become quiet." "Young Master Luo," the four guardian deities all cried out. However, after losing support from Ling Han, Feng Luo's legs swayed a few times, then fell to the ground loudly. Even the head has been stuffed into his chest. How could he possibly still be alive? Unless he really was a cockroach. Murder! Murder! Seeing such a scene, immediately some began to cry out. However, though there was a large number of Imperial guards maintaining order here, there were even more people all around, and everywhere was noisy. Not one Imperial guard managed to come over in such a short while. "You killed young Master Luo. When my lord returns, he will definitely tear you to pieces," the elephant guardian deity called out sternly. "You speak as if I have a very good relationship with Feng Yin." Ling Han shrugged, not taking such a threat seriously at all. Chapter 213. Chapter 213. Little Yi Yi. What's going on here? A few Imperial guards arrived slowly. When they saw a headless corpse on the ground, their expressions immediately changed. They were responsible for maintaining order in this place, and now that someone has died, it would be difficult for them to make their report. "Sirs, this man committed murder in public. We implore you, sirs, to act and apprehend him." The four guardian deities all pointed at Ling Han. When the Imperial guards saw Ling Han, they couldn't stop their faces from twitching. They naturally knew who Ling Han was. Their superiors had already commanded repeatedly that they were definitely not to come into conflict with this person. But this brat really caused too much worry. How could he simply commit murder in public? Ling Han scoffed and said, "Firstly, there is a need for me to correct you. This is not the Imperial City. As martial artists, it is only a matter of course for us to have conflicts with each other in the wild. Just now, I had a bit of a conflict with that idiot, but in the end, this idiot was really too weak. Just one blow, and he was finished." Everyone stared blankly. Indeed, this was not the Imperial City. It was 700 miles away from the Imperial City. It was just the fact that everyone around here had come from the Imperial City, and there were also the Imperial guards maintaining order here, which led them to still have the mindset that they were in the Imperial City. Fights and battles in the wild were indeed much too common. The number of people in Rain Country who had died because of this every year was uncountable. If each and every case was pursued, then Rain Country would probably be finished, because every single party was more or less involved in such battles. However, though that was the logic, why did it sound a bit strange? "Don't create any more trouble. Otherwise, we will be placing you under arrest. If anyone dares resist, he will be killed with no exception." One of the Imperial guards finally decided not to pass judgment on Ling Han's life until he was dead. "Agreed." Ling Han raised his hand and said. He had already killed the person he wanted to kill, and what would follow would be the four guardian deities going crazy. He had no intention to make a move at all. The four guardian deities were so mad they could spit blood. Wasn't this aimed at them? "Let's go. We'll go into the mystery realm. Everything will be discussed after my lord returns," the wolf guardian deity said in a low voice. "When my lord returns this time, he will be bringing with him supreme authority. Not even if the Rain Emperor appeared would he be able to save this brat. The tiger guardian deity nodded as well. Enter the mystery realm, the elephant guardian deity said through gritted teeth. They had once again failed to protect Feng Luo. Who knows whether or not Feng Yin would vent his fury on them when he returned. Just the thought of him was enough to freeze their hearts in their chests. The four guardian deities entered into the mystery realm one by one, and instantly disappeared. It was only now that Qi Yongyi and the others sighed in relief. They realized that there was a layer of cold sweat on their foreheads, and they could feel that their bodies were cold. Brother Ling, you are really too bold, Bailey Tengyun said, having lingering fear in his heart. He's just a smelly bug. If I've stamped him to death, then I've stamped him to death, Ling Han said unconcernedly. Though Feng Luo is not one to be feared, but Feng Yin, Qi Yongyi merely began. Who did not know that Feng Yin was extremely influential now? He could practically do anything in the academy, and just the thought of forming a deadly enmity with Feng Yin was enough to scare anyone. AI, little Yi Yi. Ling Han suddenly waved at someone behind them. Qi Yongyi and the others all turned around to look, and saw that it was a young man who only had one arm. He was only one person with one saber, but it was like he was a master of nature, with a supreme aura circulating around him. Anyone would become extremely insignificant in front of him. Can ye? But, little Yi Yi? Everyone's expressions became a little strange. Could it be that there was some ambiguous relation that could not be revealed between these two men? Can Yi walked over and did not show any objection nor discomfort at how Ling Han had addressed him. Only the saber existed in his heart and spirit. So what if the whole world slandered him or spoke ill of him? One slash from him, and everything would be silenced. All right, since everyone in our group is here, let's go, Ling Han said, smiling. When had Can Yi become one of their group? Qi Yongyi and the others were all astonished, but they did not say anything more. Instead, they kept close behind Ling Han and walked towards the teleportation door. As for the problem of Feng Yin, it was best to leave it to be discussed later. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. They passed through one by one. Ling Han was carrying Hunyao, and in the instant he passed through the vortex, he felt as if even his soul was about to torn apart. Time seemed to have lost all meaning, forever stagnating in that one moment. He had just barely finished that thought when he suddenly appeared in an unfamiliar world. The green grass was laid out like a mattress, as if it was an ocean. As a breeze blew past, the grass would sway slightly, as if a gentle wave had passed through. There was an indescribable beauty to this place. However, aside from Hunyao, who was carried in his arms, his surroundings were completely empty. There was not even a ghost around. Random teleportation. Ling Han frowned. He had asked many questions, but this was the only thing he had not asked about. In the end, it was an absolute waste for them to have gathered before, and there was no point to it at all. Thankfully, Hunyao was clinging to him all along. Otherwise, who knows where this little girl would be sent to? Without him there to control her, who knows what kind of trouble the little girl would get into, especially with her ferocious nature. Wah! Hunyao jumped down from Ling Han's body. Using all four of her limbs, she began to race around madly. She had grown up in the forest since she was a child, and this kind of world was where she truly belonged. Ling Han walked ahead, whereas Hunyao was racing around happily. At one moment, she would be in front of Ling Han, and in the next, she would be behind him. Sometimes, she would be to his left, while at other times, she would be to his right. Even Ling Han was infected by her happy mood and could not help but smile. Danger! He was suddenly alerted and hurriedly leaped towards Hunyao. Xiao, a small, white creature suddenly jumped out. It was a rabbit. It had been chewing on the grass, but Hunyao's running around had scared it out, making Ling Han think that it had been an enemy. He smiled and stopped walking. Hunyao, on the other hand, perked up and immediately tried to capture it. She raced after the rabbit, her mouth open wide, and kept trying to bite it. Obviously, Hunyao did not think the rabbit was cute at all, and merely thought of it as prey. Xiao, The rabbit fled very quickly, but Hunyo was not too slow either. She chased after it quickly, and Ling Han's yell did not manage to stop Hunyo, so he could only follow at her heels. After a while, the rabbit scrambled into the grass, and there was no sign of it left. It seemed that it had fled into a rabbit's hole. Hunyo immediately began to dig at the ground with both hands, intending to capture this rabbit at all costs. Forget it, though that little guy is very fat. With your appetite, it's not even enough to be an appetizer. Ling Han picked Hunyo up. The little girl was very displeased, pouting her mouth to show her displeasure. Shio, 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 shio. It was at this moment that a lot of rabbits jumped out from the rabbit's hole. However, these rabbits were not cute at all. They were as big as dogs and had bright red eyes, exuding a bloodthirsty aura. Damn! Ling Han cursed internally and could not help but be cautious. That was because these rabbits were actually in element gathering tier, and there were even 2 of them that were in gushing spring tier. 30, 40, 50, their numbers increased further and further. Finally, a giant rabbit that was about the size of a human being jumped out, and this last rabbit exuded an aura that would only come from someone in the late stage of gushing spring tier. Some people would say that they've poked the hornet's nest, but now, it's become the rabbit's nest one. Ling Han's eyes swept over and he had done his calculations mentally. 1 was in the late stage of gushing spring tier, 7 were in the middle stage of gushing spring tier, 21 were in the early stage of gushing spring tier, and there were even as many as 100 rabbits in element gathering tier. He immediately realized there was no way to win, then hurriedly picked up Hunyo and fled. Since there was no way to win, then he'd just have to flee. That was the easiest way out. Chapter 2:14. Chapter 2:14, Grassy Plains. There was no other option but to flee. If there were less than 10 of them in the early stage of gushing spring tier, Ling Han could still somehow manage to fight them. But there were about 20 of them here, more than enough to drown him to death. What more when there were some that were in the middle stage and one in the late stage of gushing spring tier? If Ling Han had really charged forwards, that was not called battle. That was called delivering himself up to die. He began to run, while those rabbits behind him refused to give up chasing after him. Previously, it was Hunyo who had been chasing after the little rabbit. Now, their positions were switched, and it was them now who were running like crazy. Hunyo was not anxious at all. She kept smacking Ling Han's shoulder and saying, "Run faster! Run faster!" This little girl. How could Ling Han spare the time to chastise the little girl? He could only channel all his energy into running for their lives. But the rabbit demons were well known for their speed in the first place. What more when there was an old rabbit monster that was in the late period of gushing spring tier? Thus, in just a few moments, they were right behind Ling Han and opened their mouths, ready to bite. As the old saying goes, if forced into desperate straits, even rabbits would bite. The 2 front teeth of that old rabbit demon were like hoes, long and sharp, flickering with cold light. Ling Han transformed the blood-sucking origin gold into a shield and blocked this attack. A powerful shock wave shook him, causing him to feel so bad he practically wanted to spit out blood. And with such a pause, the large number of rabbit demons who were right behind had come nearer. From the way things were going now, he would definitely be unable to escape. Ling Han sighed, drew out a swift cloud talisman and slapped it onto his body. Wong, this ordinary-looking talisman paper suddenly shone brilliantly, and an indescribable power gushed into his body. Shio, he once again began to run furiously, and his speed had immediately increased tenfold. Ji. The rabbit demons released squeaks of anger, but Ling Han was getting farther and farther from them. Finally, Ling Han had left them completely behind him, and there was no sign of him left in their eyes. Once a spiritual talisman was used, there would be no way to stop its effects. Ling Han did not want to waste it, so he continued to run forwards, and only when the effects of the swift cloud talisman were completely spent did he stop. He took out an alchemical pill and swallowed it to heal the internal injuries he had suffered when he had clashed head-on with that old rabbit demon just now. The indestructible heaven scroll was circulated, and his injuries were healing at a visible rate. As long as it's not a major injury to my nerves or bones, I would be able to recover my injuries in the time for a cup of hot tea. Ling Han smiled. However, even if I had suffered heavy injuries, I still have a drop of indestructible true fluid. Fun. Fun. Hunyo said happily. Little girl, just to let you have a little fun for that short while, I actually used up a swift cloud talisman. Ling Han shook his head, petted Hunyo's head, and said, "This is a very dangerous place. Nyo, be good and don't run around anymore." Nyo is a good Nyo. We'll be good. Hunyo nodded her head earnestly, looking very serious. Ling Han laughed. Just now, if Hunyo had not gone to chase after that little rabbit, then would they still have disturbed those demonic beasts when they passed by the lair of the rabbit demons? The answer was, who knows? That was because the rabbits lived underground and were very sensitive to the tremors above the ground. Moreover, those red-eyed rabbits were obviously very ferocious. Perhaps even if they had not disturbed them, they would still have gone berserk. Now, where should we go? He drew out the map. The entire Devil Sky Mystery Realm was very big and was rumored to be comparable to a country in size. This map only marked the outermost zone, which was roughly about 1/10 of the area of the whole Mystery Realm, which also meant that the 9 nations of the desolate north had only managed to make it this far, while the area beyond that was much too dangerous and there was no way to access it. But it was also possible that some great party had made it into a deeper area but, to keep the benefits for themselves, did not share that information with anyone else. This was very possible, because the deeper into the Mystery Realm, the higher the grade of the cultivation and martial arts techniques would have to be. So why did they have to share that information with others? Why should they not leave it for themselves to exploit? However, the Devil Sky Mystery Realm would rarely open, once in dozens of years at least, or a few hundred years at most. This was not very good to arrange. There were some parties that had been extremely influential the last time it opened, but may probably have declined to unimaginable levels the next time it opened. My current location, the outermost zone, is a plain, and has been named as the Grassy Plains. As long as I walk towards the center, there will be a ring-shaped mountain, which has a total of 4 ravines through which I can enter. And at the end of every ravine, there is a center hall. If I want to enter the deeper areas of the Devil Sky Mystery Realm, I must pass through the 4 ravines unless I am able to scale this ring-shaped mountain. However, it is said that this mountain is 1,000 feet tall and is extremely steep, so there is no way to climb up the mountain. Then I should find a ravine first. I am very curious about the depths of this mystery realm. What could be concealed inside? Ling Han looked into the distance, and indeed, he was able to see a dark shadow at the horizon. That would be the ring-shaped mountain, and it was so tall that it looked like it was connected to the sky. Let's go. Hunyo acted like an adult, tugged on Ling Han's hand, and walked forwards. They began their advance towards the ring-shaped mountain. Ling Han very quickly discovered that there was no night in here, and though the sky was bright, there was no sun. This was not a complete world. Instead, it was carved out from the real world by an almighty person with supreme methods, so it was naturally not the same as the real world. This was his first time entering into a mystery realm, and he could not help but be astonished, feeling everything was very novel. After journeying for about half a day, the little girl began to exclaim in her hunger. Ling Han was also feeling a little hungry. Thankfully, he had a spatial ring, and had already readied a supply of food which was stored inside. And in order to satisfy Hunyo's monstrous appetite, he had also prepared some demonic beast meat. It was also a piece of meat, but it contained tenfold the energy that could be gotten from eating normal meat. The higher the grade of the demonic beast, the more energy and power was contained in their blood and bones. The little girl had a very big appetite as her body required a colossal amount of energy, but there were also times when she had eaten too much, such as the time when she had eaten the root of that divine medicine. It directly transformed Hunyo into an egg. After eating their meal, they journeyed for a while longer before stopping to rest. They set up a tent on the grass, and after enough sleep, they once again continued their journey. There would be people of the 9 nations gathered here as well, and the highest cultivation level that could enter was spiritual ocean tier. Thus, They had to ensure that they were in prime condition at all times. Otherwise, if they were killed off, whom should they cry out their grievances to? The random teleportation is really detestable. Ling Han sighed. Otherwise, he would have Guang Yuan by his side and would also be able to command Qinyi, so he would not have to be so cautious like how he was now. Though they could not see the change from day to night here, Ling Han was still keeping track of the passage of time in his heart. After about 3 days, they could finally see the true form of the ring-shaped mountain ahead of them, and not the black lump they had been seeing for the last few days. By this point, there was also gradually more trees, and it was no longer purely grass being the dominant plant species around them. These trees were all purple in color, scattered throughout a green plain that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a unique scenery. "Stand right there." A voice was suddenly heard from the top of a tree. Ling Han raised his head and saw that there was a person hunched down on top. The person was continuously waving a hand at him, signaling at him to stop going forwards. His eyes were sharp enough to see that the brand on the other's arm was the same as his. "Why?" Ling Han questioned. That man looked a bit defiant, but he was more afraid that Ling Han would spoil things, so he could only say, "We are getting ready to kill a fire-eyed bull, and this is the encirclement zone we have set up. That fire-eyed bull is about to be tempted over, and if you enter, you may ruin our plans." Chapter 2:15. Chapter 2:15. Fire-eyed Bull. The fire-eyed bull was a level 3 demonic beast. It was not a very high level, but its eyes were a treasure. It could resist extreme cold, thus they were very highly prized by adventurers, for they would be extremely useful when one explored those places that were freezingly cold. As a result, there were pitifully few fire-eyed bulls left, and the price for the eyeballs of the fire-eyed bull had also become astronomical. When these people discovered that there were fire-eyed bulls here, it was unavoidable that they would have the desire to hunt them down. However, the fire-eyed bulls moved in a herd, and if they launched a stampede, then only spiritual ocean tier elites would be able to oppose them. Evidently, there was no one in spiritual ocean tier amongst these people, so there was a need for them to think how to lure one away from the herd. Only when one of them was away from its herd would they gang up on it and kill it. These thoughts flashed through Ling Han's head in an instant. He smiled slightly and said, "This place does not belong to you, and I'm walking my way here, so why do I need to circle around and take a different path?" "You!" That man was at a loss for words, but then he immediately glared at Ling Han and shouted, "If you don't get lost, I'll kill you. You are merely in the first layer of element gathering tier, and you actually dare to be so arrogant." This man was only in the 7th layer of element gathering tier, but against an opponent in the 1st layer of element gathering tier, he was perfectly able to suppress him. Ling Han sighed. Now that he was left with only one origin nucleus, it seemed very capable of attracting enemies to him. He looked at the man and asked, "Are you sure you want to use force?" Hong Long Long. It was right at this moment that a black shape appeared, approaching them at an extremely rapid pace. When he looked closely, it was a black-colored bull, but there seemed to be a flame lit and brightly burning within its eyes. There was a martial artist in front of this bull who obviously had the same plan as these people, which was to tempt a single bull away from its herd. "En?" Ling Han's heart moved, and the strange fire was currently dancing in his left hand. It was currently making "iya" sounds, transmitting a blurry thought to him, just like Hunyo when she was proclaiming her hunger. The strange fire seemed to be very interested in the two flames burning in the eyes of the fire-eyed bull, wanting to swallow them. Ling Han nodded and communicated a thought over, saying, "If I have the chance, I'll get it for you." He did not make any guarantees, because he had no idea what was the power level of this group of people. He had only seen 2 of their group so far. When he saw Ling Han did not move, the man at the top of the tree did not speak either. Instead, he stared at the fire-eyed bull anxiously.
Attack!
A large shout was issued, and 10+ people jumped down from the trees or scrambled out of the grass, managing to surround that bull from all sides. Ling Han's eyes swept over them as he counted their numbers in his heart, one in the 3rd layer of Gushing Spring Tier, one in the 2nd layer of Gushing Spring Tier, one in the 3rd layer of Gushing Spring Tier 1, and the other 12 are in element-gathering tier. There should be no problem. The problem here was that fire-eyed bull. The fire-eyed bull was a level 3 demonic beast, but it was uncertain where in level 3 it was. That was because demonic beasts had a different system of cultivation from humans, so it was very difficult to sense their level. But for Ling Han, his senses far surpassed any ordinary person's. Perhaps even the senses of a spiritual pedestal tier elite were no stronger than his. This fire-eyed bull seems to be in the late stage of gushing spring tier. The corner of Ling Han's lips twitched. The late stage of gushing spring tier would absolutely dominate over an opponent in the early stage of gushing spring tier. 3 martial artists in gushing spring tier were absolutely insufficient to compensate for such a massive gap in power. Moreover, demonic beasts had thick hides, so even if a martial artist was in the same level of the demonic beast, it was still very difficult to kill it. What more when there was a difference in level? Unless there was some secret treasure on these martial artists that could somehow turn things around. That martial artist who had been at the top of tree naturally jumped down as well and joined his companions in ganging up on the fire-eyed bull. Ling Han didn't act too reserved, climbed up the tree and occupied the man's previous position, watching the show with Hun Yo. 15 people all drew their weapons and began to gang up on the bull, but the fire-eyed bull also showed off its formidable side, beginning to charge violently at those people. It actually spat out very powerful fireballs from its mouth as well. One of the men carelessly used his sword to block one of them, but could not slice it in half at all, so the fireball crashed into his chest directly and immediately burned a big hole through his body, killing him in an instant. When the rest saw this, the expressions on the faces of the remaining 14 all changed drastically, and they became much more careful in their movements. But this fire-eyed bull was too powerful. With the supportive power of the late stage of gushing spring tier, it was completely unstoppable. Crashing and flinging its horns, it dominated everyone. Rather than saying they were ganging up on it, it might be more appropriate to say it was ravaging them. Pong, pong, pong. The martial artists of element-gathering tier were continuously being flung away by the bull as if they were scarecrows. Even if they had not been hit by the fireballs, it was definitely not a good feeling to be pierced or struck by the bull's horns. There were a few whose stomachs had been pierced through and their intestines were exposed, making for an appalling scene of devastation. Senior Brother Ma, we must use our ultimate move, the martial artist in the second layer of gushing spring tier said. Fuck! The martial artist in the third layer of gushing spring tier who had been addressed as Senior Brother Ma cursed and drew out a spirit talisman from his robes reluctantly and slapped it onto his body. Just to kill a fire-eyed bull, I have to use a strength talisman. There won't be much profit left. The others were all silent, because Senior Brother Ma was only concerned about how much money he could earn, and showed no concern for those who were injured or killed. This made them feel very disillusioned. They were not together at first. Instead, they had encountered Senior Brother Ma and his 2 companions on their way here. Due to the threats and promises of the latter, they had joined this hunting party, but from the look of things now, they were merely bait and tools to distract the bull. The spirit talisman immediately took effect. Senior Brother Ma roared loudly and, unbelievably, actually swelled up to double his previous size. Pa, pa, pa. The clothes on his body were immediately torn to pieces. Thankfully, his underpants seemed to be made of some unknown material and were tough enough not to be torn by his sudden increase in size. Numerous veins were protruding on his body, his muscles sturdy, seeming to be full of strength. Strength talisman, which claimed that miracles could be achieved through massive strength because enough strength would be able to dominate over anything in its way. The fire-eyed bull looked at him with dread. This human gave it a feeling of danger. It stopped, aimed its horns at Senior Brother Ma, and its front hooves endlessly dug at the ground. Go, die. Senior Brother Ma roared in rage, waved the metal staff in his hands, and struck out at the fire-eyed bull. The fire-eyed bull was obviously a brute force type, and dodging was not something it was good at. Thus, faced with such a strike, it had no intention to dodge. Instead, it raised its horns to receive this attack. Pong! The metal staff struck upon the bull's horns, creating a rain of fiery sparks. The front leg of the fire-eyed bull was forced into the ground, stopping just before the point where its leg joined its body. Meanwhile, the metal staff was also flung out due to the impact, causing the web between the thumb and the forefinger of senior brother Ma to tear, and instantly, blood gushed out. When Ling Han saw his, he could not help but shake his head, thinking secretly that these were two idiots to actually use strength in the stupidest of ways like this. But if an idiot was battling another idiot, that was good. In such a head-on clash, the victor would be decided very quickly. The fire-eyed bull exerted force through its legs and immediately sprung out of the ground. However, after this head-on clash, it had a stronger feeling of dread now and no longer dared to attack carelessly. Instead, it stared at senior brother Ma with extreme caution in its eyes. In the understanding of demonic beasts, the first priority was to survive. "Attack with me, and we'll kill this animal," senior brother Ma called out sternly. He needed the others to create an opportunity for him to attack. Chapter 216. Chapter 216. Tinway Destruction. Reverie _ No one wanted to attack because senior brother Ma already used up a strength talisman. This thing was very expensive, amounting to not much less than the value of a fire-eyed bull. So even if they took down the latter, senior brother Ma would take the largest share, and just how much would the others get? To risk one's life for a few hundred silvers, who wanted to do such a thing? But they couldn't not do it. Senior brother Ma was staring fiercely at them. Whoever didn't fight would definitely be the first one to be killed by senior brother Ma. There were no laws here. They had to force themselves to fight, but each one was more cautious than another, scared of being rammed by the bull or shot by its fireballs. Otherwise, even if they didn't die, they'd lose half their lives. Although they were weak, they could at least attract some of the fire-eyed bull's attention. Senior brother Ma took advantage of it to strike, and with loud pong, a great battle ensued again. Senior brother Ma was now able to fight on par with the fire-eyed bull. On top of the 10 helpers, he naturally had the upper hand. Taking several hits on the waist and back from senior brother Ma, the fire-eyed bull showed fear. It wanted to run. However, senior brother Ma and the rest already paid such a high price, there was no way they'd allow their prey to escape. Naturally, they obstructed its way with all their might, and soon, the fire-eyed bull was riddled with injuries. The demonic beast knew it was impossible to escape by now, so instead it bore a fierce look, full of a resolute atmosphere. It was about to put up a desperate fight. The fire-eyed bull has an innate mystic art, Tinway Destruction, which ignites the source of fire power within its body at once. The damage it deals is extremely terrifying. However, this will also shatter the fire-eyed bull's source of fire power, with no possibility of ever recovering, Ling Han muttered to himself. Yes. Hunyo sat prim and proper, continually nodding her head as if she could understand. It was obvious that senior brother Ma and the others did not know fire-eyed bull's ultimate ability, continually attacking aggressively on all sides. Give it some more effort, everyone. This demonic beast bull is about to reach its end. Although the bull's eyes are the most valuable, if there's a bezoar in its body, then it'll be quite a gain. Give it your all. If anyone dares to slack off, I'll let them know regret later. Under senior brother Ma and the other two strict orders, everyone was forced to put more strength into their attacks, giving senior brother Ma more chances to attack. Hong! A strong fire gushed out fiercely from within the fire-eyed bull's body, shooting in all directions like 1,000 or 10,000 fireballs shooting out together. Other than to back off, there was no chance to dodge it. However, the speed at which the flame burst out was too fast. Only senior brother Ma and his companions who were at higher tiers managed to escape the area of the bursting flame, while the others were all burned to dust. Despite evading, senior brother Ma and his companions had several burnt marks on their bodies, a spot of black and a spot of burnt, looking rather beaten. With this ultimate attack unleashed, the fire-eyed bull instantly had no strength left to stand, falling onto the ground with a pong. Damn it! Senior brother Ma cursed while crying out in pain. I've got to waste a lot more medicine pills to heal. This time there is really almost no profit. In any case, we still took down this demonic beast. One of the others smiled and walked up to strike another blow, piercing into the fire-eyed bull's brain. The bull's limbs suddenly convulsed, and then became motionless again. Its life came to an end. However, we still need to get rid of someone. Senior Brother Ma carried his rod and walked toward the tree where Ling Han sat. He revealed a smirk and said, "Kid, you thought I wouldn't find a rat like you?" Ling Han smiled. When he walked over, he didn't hide his presence and talked to one guy for a while. The surrounding people naturally discovered him. What was there to be proud of? So many have died. You still want to escape? Senior Brother Ma sneered, swinging his rod to attack. Pong! The metal rod hit the large tree, which instantly snapped. The massive trunk toppled over, and even the ground vibrated slightly from the shock. Ling Han leapt carrying Hun Yo and landed nearby. His eyes had a shred of coldness as he said, "We're without grievances or hate, yet you're still trying to kill me? Can't blame us for being hurt. What if you raid us when we're healing our wounds? Wouldn't we be on the defensive? So, please, you should just go die now." Senior Brother Ma said coldly. Ling Han laughed, and then said, "What makes you so confident that you'll beat me?" Ha 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 ha. Senior Brother Ma and his companions laughed aloud. A mere martial artist in the first layer of element gathering tier. You think you can give us hell? As expected, my current status brings too much aggro. Ling Han shook his head and said, "I really don't want to act cool, but you three pig heads are someone I'm definitely capable of destroying." Impudence. One of them shot out. The blade shed a cold glare within their hand, slicing towards Ling Han. He was in the first layer of the gushing spring tier, and while he was heavily wounded, dealing with someone in the first layer of the element gathering tier definitely didn't require more than a single blow. Naturally, it was impossible for any accidents to occur. Therefore, Senior Brother Ma and the other person smiled happily and watched. Ling Han moved, unleashed his sword with a chong, and 6 flashes of sword chi flew out. What? 6 flashes of sword chi? Senior Brother Ma and the other guy cried out in surprise at the same time, but they immediately regained their composure. No matter, although 6 flashes of sword chi was certainly something alarming, Ling Han's tier was just too low. Even with 10 flashes of sword chi, it was impossible to make up for an entire 9 tiers difference. Pu. A glaring light washed over, and they saw that the flesh on the body of that martial artist in the first layer of the gushing spring tier was sliced into pieces. And when all of Ling Han's flashes of sword chi flushed over, the person completely turned into a bloody and mutilated mess. Fu*K. Senior Brother Ma and the other guy's jaws dropped, and their eyes became larger than a brass bell. This scene completely shattered their worldview. Someone in the first layer of the gushing spring tier was instantly killed by the sword strike of a person in the first layer of the element gathering tier? Who would believe this? Even they who witnessed it with their own eyes could not believe it. You're definitely not in the first layer of the element gathering tier, Senior Brother Ma said through his teeth. Ling Han smiled as he said, "Then how strong do you think I am?" Senior Brother Ma didn't know what to say. That aura was definitely that of the first layer of the element gathering tier, but after carefully examining it, it certainly was stronger than the normal cultivation of the first layer of the element gathering tier. But even if it was stronger by tenfold, it'd only be equivalent to the middle stage of element gathering tier. So how was it possible that he had the strength to instantly kill someone in the first layer of the gushing spring tier? Whatever your cultivation is, you can only die. Senior Brother Ma roared. His strength talisman was still in effect, and with the power of the late stage of the gushing spring tier, he was infinitely confident. Hong! He came swinging his metal rod. As its speed was too fast and its power too heavy, wherever the metal rod swept, air vortices formed. Ling Han smiled slightly. His feet shifted, and his body instantly moved like a ghost. If Senior Brother Ma was truly in the late stage of the gushing spring tier, then Ling Han would have ran at once, but his opponent powered up by relying on the strength talisman, and his speed was no faster. Besides, senior brother Ma suffered a heavy hit from the fire-eyed bull's last strike, and his strength dropped drastically. His power under the strength talisman's support did not drop by much, but his speed was much less than in his optimal condition. How could he land a hit on Ling Han? Chapter 217. Chapter 217. Eliminating with a single slash. Senior brother Ma was roaring in rage. His opponent even had a child in his arms, yet he actually couldn't manage to do anything to him. This made him feel very depressed. Moreover, as time passed, he became even more anxious. Firstly, a strength talisman could only last for about 10+ minutes, and secondly, he had indeed suffered heavy injuries, and there was a need for him to immediately treat his injuries. Otherwise, the longer they were left unattended, the more serious his wounds would become. "Junior brother Yang, cooperate with me, and we'll take down this brat together," he called out. Agreed. The other person also joined into the battle with his sword in hand. Two elites of Gushing Spring tier were actually ganging up on a single martial artist of Element Gathering tier. If this was known to others, they would definitely be looked down on and disdained. However, these two men were obviously very shameless characters and did not care about this fact any one bit. They only wanted to kill Ling Han as soon as possible. But to their shock, they discovered they could not possibly achieve it. Ling Han's figure was as slippery as a swimming fish, and they were completely unable to catch hold of him. They could only chase after him in vain and pointlessly waste their energy. And the more time passed, the worse the situation was for them. "Brat, what kind of man are you to keep dodging? If you have the guts to, stand and face us directly." Senior brother Ma tried to provoke him. "Are you an idiot?" Ling Han humphed. "You already said you were able to kill me in a single move, and I am still supposed to stand and face you directly? Do you take me for an idiot, or are you the real idiot here?" "Damn you!" Senior brother Ma howled in fury. "However, I don't have the time to wait until you're exhausted, so receive a slash from me then." Ling Han's face became solemn, the sword intent of the mysterious 3,000 circulating in his heart. He began to mull over this style. Instantly, an oppressive feeling as if a storm was about to arrive enveloped senior brother Ma and his last remaining companion. What kind of sword technique is this? Senior brother Ma instantly looked shocked. In his eyes, it was as if Ling Han had become the center of the universe, and everything else in the surroundings had paled in color. "Why is that I can't even move my body?" Junior brother Yang was about to cry. His opponent's sword was right about to strike him, yet he couldn't even move his body. Didn't that mean he could only wait for his death? Ling Han smiled internally. He had used his divine sense to freeze the two of them, which created the illusion that they were unable to move. This was an influence to their consciousness. Usually, as long as one had a strong enough will, he would naturally not be affected. For example, Ken Yi. With the focus and concentration he had on saber arts, even if Ling Han was still in heaven tier, he would still be unable to shake Ken Ye's will. However, the two of them, due to their heavy injuries, already had very weakened wills. They were then shocked by Ling Han's 6 flashes of sword chi, and astonished by the strange amount of power a martial artist merely in the first layer of element gathering tier had. Their wills were naturally very strongly affected. As a result, Ling Han instilled his influence into the sword stance of the 3 styles of black origin, leading them into thinking that they were unable to move. Mysterious 3000. Ling Han brandished his sword. Shio, shio, shio. A few dozen flashes of light from the sword were shot out, solidifying into sharp blades that swiftly flew towards senior brother Ma and his accomplice. Due to the pressure of death, senior brother Ma and his accomplice managed to get from under the oppression of Ling Han's divine sense. At this time, there was no longer any time left for them to flee. They flourished and whirled their respective weapons in order to block as much of this attack as possible. Pong, 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 pong. Every blade of origin power here was equivalent to a full force attack from Ling Han. In other words, it was like there were over 20 Ling Hans ganging up on each of them. Who would be able to withstand such a barrage? They managed to parry and shatter a few blades of origin power, But there were even more blades of origin power that managed to pierce into their bodies and ripped at them with terrifying, destructive power. Ling Han flew past and twirled his sword. Pu, Pu. Instantly, two heads flew up into the sky before once again falling onto the ground, revealing the defiant and fearful faces of senior brother Ma and his accomplice. Ling Han panted and said, "No wonder that guy, the Sword Emperor, was so awesome. I have only grasped 1% of this one style, and I can already kill two elites of gushing spring tier." He looked pensive and thought, if the Heaven's Sword sect still existed and found out that I learned the 3 styles of black origin, they probably won't spare me, right? Would a sect that could foster out a monster like the Sword Emperor have a shattering Void Tier warrior in their ranks? I had previously thought that there was no one in shattering Void Tier in this land, but now that I think about it, it may be that such powerful ultimate warriors preferred to keep to themselves and hid themselves away from the rest of the world. It would be best to use the 3 styles of black origin as little possible, only if it was a matter of life and death, or if I can ensure that this secret will not be exposed to anyone else. Meet. When he had been engaged in his thoughts, Hunyo had already jumped out and had started prancing around beside the fire-eyed bull. Though Ling Han had bought a considerable amount of demonic beast meat, but the majority was level 1, and there was only a few from level 2, what more level 3. Thus, the little girl was practically salivating by now. "You glutton," Ling Han teased with a laugh. "Nyo is glutton." Hunyo nodded her head furiously, thinking that was a compliment. Ling Han laughed loudly and began to deal with the fire-eyed bull. The strange fire kept transmitting its thoughts to him, impatiently wanting to refine and swallow those 2 eyeballs. He first started a fire, then sliced off one of the bull's legs and began to roast it over the fire. Meanwhile, he also dug out the bull's eyes and held them in his left hand. The strange fire gushed out and enveloped the eyeballs, which actually started shrinking at a very rapid pace. Just a few moments and they were turned into ash, whereas the strange fire ducked back into Ling Han's left hand and transmitted a thought that it had not eaten enough yet to Ling Han. "These 2 gluttons," Ling Han thought mockingly, as he appeased the strange fire, promising that he would look for more food for it in the future. In just a short while, the bull's leg was exuding a tempting aroma. Ling Han drew out a dagger, sliced off a few slabs of beef, and placed them onto a plate. That was the good thing about having a spatial ring could still carry with him such impractical things, for they would not occupy much space anyways. Hunyo immediately began to eat happily. She was a typical glutton. She had not yet swallowed the first piece of meat when her hand would stretch out towards the second. She stuffed her mouth as full as possible, so much that it was difficult even to chew. The whole body of a level 3 demonic beast was a treasure for the current Ling Han. The tough hide of the bull could be made into defensive equipment that even sharp weapons instilled with origin power would find difficult to penetrate. And the beef, bones, and tendons were all very nutritious food, able to strengthen and invigorate the body, comparable to some treasured items. Of course, the most precious were the eyes and the horns. However, the eyes had already been eaten by the strange fire, and only a pair of horns was left. They could be forged into weapons that had powerful destructive ability. Upon a closer look, there was a pattern of seals that looked like writing on the surface of the bull's hornset was precisely these seals that had gifted the fire-eyed bull with such overwhelming destructive power. Otherwise, this pair of horns would only be harder than a normal bull's horns. While Ling Han continued to eat his beef, he tried to activate these seals. This was a very difficult thing to do. After all, each and every person had differing martial arts. What more when it was a completely different species? However, Ling Han was not any ordinary person. Soon, one of the seals lit up, then the second and the third. A red light enveloped the horns, as if the bull's horns were burning. Ling Han gave them a light wave, and a tongue of flame shot out strongly from the bull's horn, drawing a line of burnt marks that were 3 inches deep on the ground. Chapter 218. Chapter 218. Meeting Gu Fenghua again. So sharp. Ling Han nodded. If destructive power was the only thing in consideration here, this pair of bull horns had surpassed the sword he was using now. Of course, if he was able to use a suitable spirit tool, then the destructive power at his disposal would definitely not be beneath this pair of bull horns. Burp. Hunyo burped and patted her little tummy in satisfaction. She had really not eaten much today because the beef of the fire-eyed bull contained too much nutrition. Even she would not be able to take it if she had eaten too much. Ling Han was also very full. Though he had the ability of a martial artist in the first layer of Gushing Spring tier, he was still in Element Gathering tier in truth. Thus, the meat of a level 3 demonic beast was also extremely nutritious to him. Unfortunately, he had not brought any spiritual herbs with him. Otherwise, he would be able to make a pot of soup and allow the various essences to mingle. That was what a really nutritious meal would be like. He sat down and began to digest his meal, whereas Hunyo began to run around. This was one of her own methods to absorb nutrition. The other was naturally to sleep. After about 2 hours, Ling Han stood up and smiled. There has been a slight improvement to my muscles and blood vessels, whereas my cultivation has increased quite quickly. Obviously, the more precious an item was, the more it could help to improve one's base. Those that could only increase cultivation could only be considered scraps. If I eat some meat of the fire-eyed bull every day, and swallow some alchemical pills as well, I should be able to truly reach the peak of Element Gathering tier in about 10 days. Then I will break through to Gushing Spring tier and unravel the secrets of the Black Tower. After he had dealt with the rest of the fire-eyed bull, he stored everything in his spatial ring. The two of them then continued on their way to the ring-shaped mountain. On their journey, there was gradually more and more trees. There were even some villages, but they had been long abandoned, and there was no sign of life in them. There were even some villas in the villages. They were very luxuriously decorated. Unfortunately, they were completely deteriorated, because who knows how many people had come to plunder them within these few thousand years. So, even if they had once been in a perfectly good condition, they would have been dug up and turned upside down later on. It was said that the great clans of the 9 nations of the desolate north began to rise up after they first ventured into the Devil's Sky mystery realm, and even managed to establish powerful nations, creating a base that endured for a few thousand years. There were always those who were not willing to give up, and still continued to hunt around in the village. Who knows, they might be really lucky and discover a treasure that everyone else had somehow missed. There were also those who had ill intentions and lay in ambush in the village in order to rob those who had actually managed to find something. In case of Ling Han and Hunyo, 1 adult and 1 child, they didn't even have any baggage on them, looking completely impoverished. Thus, they didn't actually encounter any ambushes. They advanced smoothly on their way, and after another few days, they had arrived at the foot of the ring-shaped mountain. Was this really a mountain? Ling Han raised his head to look up, and doubt appeared on his face. That was because the slope was much too steep. Rather than calling it a mountain, it looked more like a wall. But what kind of wall would be as tall as 1,000 feet? Was this the creation of an almighty warrior of shattering void tier? He sighed. He had never entered into a mystery realm in the past. Otherwise, with his cultivation level of heaven tier, he would definitely be able to investigate the truth behind this place. Because it was not easy to identify directions here, Ling Han and Hunyo circled around the mountain. Anyways, there were only 4 ravines here, so they would at most only have to walk a quarter of a circle. 2 days later, they had still not managed to reach the ravine. Instead, there appeared a small lake in front of them, and Hunyo instantly exclaimed about wanting to take a bath. Ling Han had a spatial ring, so he could stuff all his clothes, food, and necessities inside, but he couldn't possibly bring along even his bathwater and bathtub as well. That would occupy too much space. They had already been in the mystery realm for 5 days. Hunyo used to be filthy and hated bathing, but after hanging around with Lu Yutong and Li Xichan for so many days, she grew to love bathing. Every day, she would shamelessly wash herself clean. What more after 5 days of not taking a bath? Let's see if it's safe or not first, Ling Han said. He feared that there might be some dangerous demonic beast in the lake, or perhaps even the lake itself was a huge danger. With a splash, The lake waters split open and a slender figure that had an astonishing beauty appeared. Ling Han hurriedly pushed Hunyo down and sat, thinking that he was probably going to get styes. He actually accidentally saw a woman bathing. He lowered his voice and said, "Nyo Nyo, let's wait for a while." Hunyo did not understand, and her small mouth was instantly pouting to express her displeasure. There were bushes all around the lake which provided very good cover. When the adult and child sitting on the ground, there was no need to worry that they would be discovered. However, after a while, there was a sha, and the bushes shook. A man actually appeared. The guy's backside was protruding, and he was half lying on his stomach on the ground. He kept looking in the direction of the lake and crawled around in the meantime, seeming to be switching to different angles. As he peeped, he salivated and mumbled, "Indeed, one needs to change to different angles to admire a beauty to really enjoy it." Ling Han took a look and could not help having a strange expression as he said, "Brother pervert, why have we met again?" The man was the self-proclaimed magnificent pervert, Gu Fenghua. Caught red-handed, Gu Fenghua almost jumped up in his hiding spot. He turned around and spared Ling Han a glance, and a puzzled expression appeared on his face as he said, "How do you know I am a pervert? Could it be that my perversion is already as luminous as the sun, and has reached the level where others can spot it with one glance? Brother pervert does not remember me anymore?" Ling Han asked with a smile. Gu Fenghua stared at Ling Han for a while, then shook his head repeatedly and said, "You're not a beauty, so how could I possibly remember you? Could it be that we share common interests?" His eyes lit up, and he pointed in the direction of the lake. "Brother pervert is talking so loudly. Are you not scared you will alert that young miss?" Ling Han asked, smiling. Gu Fenghua hurriedly covered his mouth and said, "You almost spoiled my big business. If that girl had discovered me, then wouldn't my efforts of tailing her all this while and taking advantage of her moment of distraction to scatter a handful of itchy powder on her, forcing her to have no choice but to take a bath, be completely wasted?" Ling Han's mouth twitched as he said, "I am very deeply impressed with your determination, brother pervert. You are indeed very perverted." Gu Fenghua looked very pleased with himself and could not hold himself back from laughing out. Moreover, his laughter was getting louder and very hearty too. Who? The girl who had been bathing in the lake was naturally able to hear such a loud commotion. Shua, a white figure flashed past, and she had already dived into the bushes. She stretched out a delicate hand and instantly grabbed the clothing that she had hung on them. After only a while, a flash of sword chi shot over, and the slash scattered sliced pieces of leaves flew all over. A young girl also arrived in a leap. There were still some droplets of water dripping down her hair, and her pretty face was filled with killing intent. Ling Han picked up Hunyo and leaped away together with Gu Fenghua, avoiding this strike. "Is every time you peek such a massacre, brother pervert?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Hey, don't wrong me. I am only a pervert, not a bad man. A thing like peeping has naturally nothing to do with me," Gu Fenghua said seriously, waving his hands around fiercely, pushing away all blame. "Yo, if you two big brothers like me, then just say it. Seeing as big brothers are so handsome, I may not be unwilling to have some fun with big brothers, so what need is there for you to peep so secretly at me?" The girl did not get any results with her attack, and actually withdrew her murderous air, her expression all smiles. She was not a virtuous girl. Chapter 219. Chapter 219. Implicated. Hearing the girl's words, Ling Han's impression of Gu Fenghua instantly improved a considerable amount. Using tricks to make a girl have no choice but to bathe and take advantage of the chance to peek on her. This should have been a very despicable act. But from the moment the girl opened her mouth, he was sure that she was no decent girl, which proved that Gu Fenghua still had his boundaries and had not used those kinds of tricks on decent, honorable girls. As the saying goes, even thieves have their code of conduct. Though this was quite a bit different, but it was a kind of principle, after all. They pervert with principles. Ling Han covered Nyo-Nyo's ears and said, "Does your family know you are so unrestrained, miss?" Giggle. The girl trembled lightly with laughter and cast a coy glance at Ling Han, then said, Big brother, could it be that you're interested in my master? Though my master is quite advanced in years, but she's still very attractive, exactly the type of woman that a young man like you has the least resistance to. Ling Han shuddered, turned to Gu Fenghua and said, Pervert, this is your problem, you solve it. After saying these words, he picked up Hunyo and walked towards the lake. Now that the lake was no longer occupied, Hunyo naturally could have her bath. Yeah. Hunyo jumped down from Ling Han's arms and completely removed all her clothing in a few moments. With a splash, she had jumped into the lake and began to play to her heart's desire. Ling Han, come play with Nyo, she said to Ling Han, acting spoiled. Ling Han waved his hand with a smile. He had no desire to get undressed in front of others, especially when that woman was so shockingly unrestrained in her behavior. Pong, pong, pong. Soon, sounds of battle came from the bushes, and after a while, Gu Fenghua came out with a swollen face that was not much different from a pig's head. However, there was no sign left of that girl. Ling Han was curious and asked, That woman is only in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, so why is Brother Pervert cutting such a sorry figure? Gu Fenghua threw a disdainful look at Ling Han and said, A good man does not fight with a woman. Ling Han's mouth twitched. So that was why he had been so harshly beaten up. But that girl should have found out that Gu Fenghua's ability was far above her. Thus, she had only given him a beating and ran off to avoid inciting Gu Fenghua's killing intent. In this mystery realm, the benefits of having a good background were much smaller. As long as you weren't caught, who would know if you had committed murder? Ha 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 ha. Why has your cultivation level fallen to the 1st layer of element gathering tier? Gu Fenghua suddenly laughed. Then he scratched his head. When other people cultivate, they become stronger and stronger. But the more you cultivate, the more you regress. You indeed have some potential to be a pervert. Ling Han could not help but shake his head. Looks like if he did not break through to Gushing Spring tier, his present condition would attract a lot of aggression towards him. That's odd. Though your cultivation level is lower, but why is it that the feeling you give me is even more oppressive than before? Gu Fenghua said, looking a bit baffled, and scratched his head, seeming very puzzled. Haha, you are indeed a pervert. In the end, he credited everything to his being a pervert. After all, as long as he was a pervert, anything odd could be easily explained away by him as being perverted. Ling Han did not want to be stuck in confusion about this point, so he asked, Didn't you go back into the mountains to cultivate? Why have you come here again? On my way back, I've encountered a goddess and kept trying to hit on her. In the end, I ran into this place somehow and was separated from that goddess. Gu Fenghua suddenly startled, then said, I won't chat with you anymore. I still have to go find my dream girl. Xiao, he broke into a run, and in a mere moment, there was no sign of him left. Ling Han shook his head and drew some clear water from the lake to wash his face. Hunyo did not find it that fun playing alone in the water. Thus, she only bathed herself clean, then ran onto the shore. Acting spoiled, she had Ling Han dry her and help her wear her clothes before she finally smiled sweetly. The two of them continued on their way and witnessed much bloodshed throughout. This place also contained people of the 9 nations. It was possible that there might be some who were not randomly transported when they entered, which meant that the people of a nation may appear in the same big area. However, as they get closer to the ring-shaped mountain, since there were only 4 ravines that connected into the mountain's depths, many of the people from different countries began to encounter each other. Ling Han's principle was, if you don't mess with me, I would be too lazy to bother with you either. As someone who used to be an ultimate elite of heaven tier, he was very indifferent to the idea of belonging to a country. Brother, help me. However, he had not managed to maintain his attitude of minding his own business and staying away from trouble for long when he saw a young man swiftly racing towards him from the wilderness. There were 2 middle-aged men wielding sabers chasing after him, wearing fierce expressions. One glance was enough for Ling Han to know that this was an attempted robbery and murder. It was no wonder that this young man had fixed his eye on him. He was dressed very richly. His clothing was made using high-quality silk, and the various ornaments hanging from his clothes were all expensive. He was obviously a member of a rich family, and due to the random teleportation, he was separated from the elders of his clan when he entered this place. And he was only in the 5th layer of element gathering tier. That was like an idiot carrying gold and parading around in the streets. It would be strange if he had not attracted others coveting his wealth. This young man acted as if he was a drowning man who had managed to grasp onto a life-saving straw, and he did not care even if Ling Han looked younger than himself and had a little girl by his side. He simply ran towards Ling Han while screaming loudly at him. When it was a matter of life and death, his speed miraculously became quite a bit faster than normal, and very soon, he ran behind Ling Han and pointed at the 2 men that had chased him as he said, "Brother, help me chase them off, and I will definitely reward you handsomely." The 2 pursuers stopped. One wielded a saber while the other held a sword, and they both gave Ling Han a glance before laughing loudly. And here I was thinking that it was some kind of powerful character. So it's just a little brat in the 1st layer of element gathering tier. What? The young man exclaimed in shock. Initially, he had thought that since Ling Han dared to bring a little girl with him and walk around so casually in this wilderness, he had to be extremely powerful. He had never thought that Ling Han was only in the 1st layer of element gathering tier and was much weaker than even him. Ling Han could not help but sigh. After merging the 9 nuclei, his cultivation level seemed to have dropped drastically. Not only his friends worried about him, but even others would look at him in disdain out in the wilderness. What a depressing thing. That's fine. We'll just kill them both. The man armed with a saber looked fiercely at them. Shua. His words had just left his mouth when he quickly shot forward, raising his sword to slash at Ling Han. Ling Han merely raised his hand casually, and the man's wrist fell into his hand. The man was only in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, but even if they were at the same cultivation level, with Ling Han's 5 element origin nuclei, he would have several times the power of this man. What more when he had broken through to the 10th layer and had power comparable to the 1st layer of gushing spring tier. The saber wielder struggled but felt as if it was a metal chain that was holding onto his hand, and could not manage to get free at all. Fatty, what's wrong with you? What's so fun about playing with a little guy? Kill him quickly, the man holding a sword urged. The saber wielder was already breaking out into a cold sweat. In front of him, Ling Han's face was still very calm, and he even had a sliver of a smile on his lips. However, it was precisely this smile that made him feel a coldness that seemed to penetrate into his body. Da. His teeth were endlessly clicking together as he said, "Old Zhang, come quickly and help me. This brat is strange." What's so strange? He's just a piece of trash in the 1st layer of element gathering tier. The swordsman said disdainfully. Fatty, this is not funny in the slightest. Kill off those 2 brats quickly. Chapter 220. Chapter 220. Vicious and Merciless. Reverie _ Ling Han casually threw a slap, and the fatty wielding the saber was sent flying. The swordsman, old Zhang's expression stiffened. He thought that the fatso was showing off, but no matter how he showed off, there was no reason to take a slap from the other party. It instantly raised his vigilance. This kid is strange, the saber-wielding fatty said as he got up, stroking his hurting face. Strange where? Old Zhang asked. His strength is strangely large. When he held on to my wrist just now, I couldn't even get free, the saber-wielding fatso said truthfully with his face was on fire. If he tried to lie to save his face, it might get them both killed. Could it be an inborn gift like surprising physical power? The sword-wielding old Zhang speculated. It should be so. His presence is definitely just that of the 1st layer of the element gathering tier, the saber-wielding fatso said with complete certainty. Both men stared fiercely at Ling Han. Kid, we originally had no grievances or hate, but if you must try to be brave, then it's you seeking your own death. Ling Han sighed as he never thought about helping. Adventuring here meant having resolve to face dangers, but who let that the youngster bump right into him with 2 middle-aged men who couldn't wait to attack them on his tail? The fact remained that he looked easy to bully, and now that they've gotten a small lesson, they were beginning to take him seriously. Hunyo, the skinny one is up to you, Ling Han said with a smile. He might as well let Hunyo practice. The little girl had the gushing spring tear guy from the Wu clan running in circles the other time, so the guy in the 9th layer of the element gathering tier before them shouldn't pose much danger to her. Good. Hunyo immediately jumped out. Other than eating, fighting, and such were her favorite activity, except they had been in the Imperial City so far, thus Ling Han wouldn't let her fight. What? The sword-wielding old Zhang almost got a crooked nose from anger. He let a 5, 6-year-old little girl fight him? He couldn't help but conceive a wicked idea. He was going to split the little girl in two and use her blood-soaked corpse to tell Ling Han what were the results of infuriating him. Kid, let's spar a bit more. The saber-wielding fatso flourished his saber. This time, I definitely won't underestimate you. Those words implied that he lost earlier only because he was careless. Ling Han smiled and said, your face still hurts, right? You! The saber-wielding fatty was instantly angered out of embarrassment. That slap certainly hit him hard, so much that it still stung. Since you know the pain, why can't you remember and learn? Ling Han shook his head and laughed. You are already a dead man since you unleashed your saber against me anyways. It matters not if you can't remember. Bullsh. The saber-wielding fatso bellowed. With both his hands holding the saber's handle, he fiercely erupted with strong attacks. Large demon heaven saber, splitting skies and shattering ground. I, Zhu Qian Kuren, am invincible. Pooh. He hadn't finished his war cry, yet his stomach had already received a heavy kick and his entire being instantly flew like a cannonball. Pong. He fell heavily onto the ground and shrunk like a shrimp, his face convulsing. Ling Han pulled back his leg. In this attack, he used 20 to 30% of his strength, but for an opponent in the 9th layer of the element gathering tier, that much power was enough to be lethal. However, this fatso was so fat that the power was redistributed by large amounts of fat. Unexpectedly, the kick didn't destroy his internal organs, but the skin on his entire body cracked under the immense shock, instantly turning him into a tragic, blood-soaked man. Even though his life was saved, the fatso could only groan, no longer having a shred of battle power. On the other side, Hunyo was playing very contently. Her cultivation progress was absurdly fast, and she was now at the 7th layer of the element gathering tier. She went head-on with the old sword user fearlessly, exhibiting a speed advantage over him and circling behind her opponent for a surprise attack. All this while, old Zhang could not even land a single attack on her. Shwa shwa shwa. Hunyo's hands were like tiger claws, and after several swings, old Zhang's back was covered in fresh blood. The blood stimulated Hunyo's murderous nature even further as she bared her teeth halfway and attacked even more ferociously. Behind Ling Han, the youngster stared with his mouth agape. A youngster in the 1st layer of the element gathering tier wasted an opponent in the 9th layer of the element gathering tier with a kick, and a 5, 6-year-old little girl completely suppressed her opponent. What sort of monsters were these two? After a moment's effort, Hunyo slapped the sword user old Zhang unconscious and laughed as she returned to Ling Han's side, reverting to her look of a cute and pure little princess. Pa, pa. At this time, the youngster used a rock to bash the fatso and old Zhang's heads into mush to make sure they died. Even heaven-tier warriors wouldn't survive that. Ling Han couldn't help but look at him twice more. This youngster was quite vicious. Thank you, benefactor, for upholding justice and saving me. The youngster quickly threw away the rock, and with an expression filled with humility, he said, I'm called Yang Ming. I'm from Stone Country. Please don't blame me. I was hunted down over a long way and almost lost my life. I had to at least do that much to vent the hate in my heart. The two were mere robbers. If they died, then that was it. Ling Han did not care about them. What surprised him was Yang Ming's expression when he set about finishing them off without a shred of emotion, appearing utterly cold-blooded. Benefactor, could I tag along? I was separated from my family when I came in, but I believe I can definitely meet them at the Central Hall. When that time comes, my family's seniors will definitely repay you generously. Yang Ming looked sincerely at Ling Han. Unsure of how long it'd be before reaching the canyon ahead, with multiple dangers ahead, it'd naturally be safer to cling to someone strong. Ling Han smiled as he looked at the other. While this guy was talking all this drivel, he just wanted him as a bodyguard. Was not bad at hoaxing people. Yang Ming saw that Ling Han was unmoved, then said unwillingly, "Benefactor, you know why those two were hunting me down? Because you look like a fat sheep?" Ling Han laughed. "That's only half." Yang Ming shook his head and continued, "In the village ahead, I was very lucky to have found an ancient record, but I soon bumped into those two and was hunted down by them. I placed the ancient record on top of a dried-up tree. As long as Benefactor promises to protect me along the way, I'm willing to give you the ancient record." "Ancient record?" Ling Han pondered and said, "What's that ancient record about?" "I only briefly looked at it." "The ancient record should be an indigenous inhabitant's diary, recording the details of the ring-shaped mountain," Yang Ming said, paused, then continued, "There's also a map inside." The latter words moved Ling Han. He was very interested in the depths of the ring-shaped mountain, wanting to investigate its secrets. "All right, let's get that ancient record." Ling Han nodded. Yang Ming exulted at this reply. Normally, a cultivator's like 4 books was related to arts and skills. They naturally would not glance at other books more than once. He was only making a bet, and unexpectedly, Ling Han actually gave him a promise. Chapter 221. Chapter 221, Logbook. Reverie _ They walked a bit on the outer ring of the ring-shaped mountain. Sure enough, Yang Ming took out an ancient record from a dried-up tree. The cover had almost completely rotted away, and it wasn't hidden very well. Half of it showed. Obviously, Yang Ming only hid it behind the tree trunk hastily at the time and shoved in the ancient record offhandedly, then immediately left. Hence it was hidden so sloppily. "Young Master Han here?" Yang Ming submitted the ancient record respectfully with his head slightly lowered, a hint of unwillingness that was hard to perceive in his eyes. For normal people, this ancient record was worth nothing, but for some, it could be priceless. Ling Han took it without hesitation. On their way, he told Yang Ming his name. Hearing "Benefactor" and such all the time was uncomfortable. He started to leaf through it in front of Yang Ming without being evasive. This was certainly a predecessor's logbook. The part at the start recorded some trifling matters. The person was called Xiao Ding, who was once a chief that managed a village, living a quiet life. Xiao family had lived here for many generations, but a change happened in Xiao Ding's generation. The whole village was driven away from the mystery realm, but Xiao Ding stayed behind with an act of great deception. He disobeyed the orders of one called Demon Master at the time, and entered the depths of the ring-shaped mountain, wanting to know why they were being expelled. Relying on his understanding of the land, he avoided several barriers, which enabled him to enter the depths. However, he was unable to enter the depths of the core area as a mysterious power infected him, making him feel like he wasn't himself anymore. He immediately ran, but it was too late. By the time he escaped and reached his village, he was already unable to control himself, barely able to record what he experienced in the depths of the mountains. The diary ended there. He probably died. Xiao Ding recorded various restrictions, recording everything in immense detail. This was probably because he was afraid he'd forget something. In the end, he conjectured that a terrifying existence was suppressed within Devil's Sky Mystery Realm, and the central hall was a backup array that reinforced the restrictions through blood sacrifice. Perhaps it existed since the very distant past, but problems occurred in his generation. Since the people in the mystery realm had all left, then what were the restrictions for? There was only one possibility. Within was suppressed something of ominous origin. Ling Han closed the logbook and sunk into contemplation. From the looks of it, this mystery realm was very stable, so it shouldn't be a problem with the mystery realm itself like it breaking down. Then why were the people driven away back then? In the past, a blood zombie appeared in Devil's Sky Mystery Realm, and Xiao Ding mentioned ominous origin in the logbook, believing that here was imprisoned something terrible and evil. Could the two be related? At the time, was it because the blood zombie's appearance that resulted in everyone's expulsion? Mystery realms were created by shattering void tier cultivators, but it didn't mean that every mystery realm had such a formidable person overseeing it. If shattering void tier cultivators couldn't shatter the void to enter into divine plane, then they too would die of old age. Perhaps, in the depth of this mountain were large amounts of blood zombies that required the power of a shattering void tier cultivator to subdue. However, inside Devil Sky Mystery Realm, there was no longer such a formidable cultivator. Therefore, they were forced to leave, leaving an empty space. The mystery Realmto trapped that thing. Young Master Han, can we depart? Yang Ming carefully asked. Ling Han nodded and said, go. The three set out, walking forward for half a day and finally seeing a large ravine from afar. It was as if a heavenly saber split the ring-shaped mountain, literally splitting open a seam in the massive mountain, which was as if connected to the sky. The fracture that descended from the sky was terrifyingly surprising. Even Ling Han could feel a hint of saber intent. In previous years, there had to exist an exceptionally strong cultivator who struck 4 times, cutting the ring-shaped mountain into 4 sections. Shattering Void Tier, it definitely was a Shatter Void Tier cultivator, Ling Han thought to himself. In his former life, even he didn't have such might. Only the legendary Shattering Void Tier cultivators boasted such remarkable abilities that a sliver of saber intent could remain even after an unknown amount of years, not eroded by the time. Too terrifying, a saber intent that could cross an eternity was unheard of. Although the ravine was in view, it was further than it appeared. Approaching it still required passing a long stretch of road. Since their target already appeared in their sight, they naturally had enough enthusiasm to speed up. Ah! A tragic scream came from afar. Apparently, a fight was going on, a very usual thing here. In a flash, 6 people, each with a sword, scuttled out from inside the jungle on the right. Each of them was as if they'd saw a ghost, terrified, only knowing to bolt for their lives. Xiao, a black shadow passed through extremely quickly, and with a jump, it already caught up to a person, waving its hand toward the person's back of the head. That person seemed to have no more courage left, not even daring to resist, just escaping frantically. But they didn't know it was impossible for them to match up to the black shadow's speed. Instantly, their head took a hit, and with a paw, the entire head was in smithereens and hot blood gushed out. A terrifying and disgusting scene appeared. The black shadow lunged on top of the body to suck the man's blood and gnaw on his flesh. Hiss! Blood zombie? Ling Han frowned, automatically thinking about that evil thing. Wrong, wrong, wrong. This isn't a blood zombie, but a second-tier bronze-armored combi. A youngster in black walked out the jungle. His face was dead pale without a hint of blood, giving off a feeling of a poltergeist in broad daylight. In his hand were 3 metal chains that were drawn tightly, as if tied to something heavy, but which was hidden inside the jungle and therefore out of sight. Thousand Corpse Sect? Ling Han knit his brows. What? You actually know of Thousand Corpse Sect? The youngster in black stared at Ling Han, revealing a strong, murderous aura. Ling Han sneered, revealing a disgusted expression. Thousand Corpse Sect was an unparalleled evil force. People from this sect weren't strong themselves, but each refined a strong cultivator's corpse, then known as Corpse Soldier, commanding it like their own limbs. Its battle power was exceedingly shocking. The Corpse Soldiers were separated into 3 large stages, which were Bronze Armored Corpse, Silver Armored Corpse, and Gold Armored Corpse. Each stage was further divided into first level, second level, and third level, for a total of 9 levels that corresponded to the 9 tiers in martial arts from Body Refining Tier to Heaven Tier. Where were the Corpse Soldiers of Thousand Corpse Sect from? Of course, from stealing the corpses of martial artists. If the martial artist's strength was strong while living, then the Corpse Soldier made from his body would be comparable in power. A third-level gold-armored corpse could even compare to a formidable Heaven-tier cultivator. In order to steal a strong corpse, Thousand Corpse Sect could be said as deranged and frenzied, not only digging up ancient tombs, but even stealing the corpses of strong cultivators buried not long ago. Consequently, This sect brought disgust to an overwhelming majority and was once attacked by a coalition. Ling Han assumed that Thousand Corpse sect was annihilated. Unexpectedly, its disciple came running out now. Chapter 222. Chapter 222, Thousand Corpse Sect. The black-robed young man stared at Ling Han. This young man could not possibly exceed 18 years old in age, and was only in the first layer of element-gathering tier. Then how is it possible that he would immediately think of the Thousand Corpse sect when he heard the words bronze-armored corpse? Strange. His name was Rong Huan Xian, and he bore a blood feud on his shoulders. He was forced into desperate straits by another, but then there appeared a huge turnaround in his life. He had obtained the inheritance of the Thousand Corpse sect and became the heir of the sect even after it had vanished for so many generations. To obtain his vengeance, he dug up the skeletal remains of one of the ancestors of his enemy's clan, refined them to become his corpse soldier, and eliminated the entirety of his enemy's clan. He had obtained his revenge, but he had also fallen captive to this feeling of being mighty. Not only had he not given up on this twisted path, he had instead ventured further and further along it. He began to cultivate his own corpse soldiers and search for new corpses to likewise transform and develop them. Young man, you know too much. Rong Huan Xian pointed, and that corpse soldier that had been devouring blood and flesh immediately stood up and stared at Ling Han and the rest. This was an old corpse of unknown age. The flesh around its chest was long rotted, revealing the bones inside. However, the flesh on its head, hands, and feet was quite well preserved and only half rotted. But this only made it even more terrifying as lumps of flesh were just hanging there, faintly revealing the white of the bones underneath. It was terrifying enough to scare anyone with lesser bravery to death. The corpse soldier had of course lost all sentience. However, after being refined, it was equivalent to it having gained a second life, though it was only left with the instinctive need to devour blood and flesh in order to strengthen itself. Now that its meal had been interrupted, it was naturally enraged and moaned at Ling Han and the others. Its chin made a ba-da-da-da sound, as if it was about to fall off at any moment, making for an extremely terrifying sight. Kill them. Rong Huan Xian issued his command. Xiao, that corpse soldier instantly leaped over, charging towards Ling Han and the others. A mere second-tier bronze-armored corpse. Ling Han humphed. His sword left its scabbard and stabbed towards that corpse soldier. With a ting, the blade scraped against the bones in the chest of the corpse soldier, creating a line of fiery sparks. The bones of the corpse soldier actually remained unscathed, which was outside of Ling Han's expectations. Ha 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 ha. This second-tier bronze-armored corpse soldier has just about consumed enough flesh and blood and is about to evolve to the third tier. So how could it be so easily injured by a piece of trash in the first layer of element-gathering tier like you? Rong Huan Xian said coldly, making no move to interfere. In truth, he was in gushing spring tier. If he decided to make a move, then he would definitely be much stronger than the second-tier bronze-armored corpse. Shua, that corpse soldier stretched out a clawed hand towards Ling Han's heart. Its movements were vicious and deadly. Ling Han humphed, and his figure swayed, actually avoiding that corpse soldier and coming face to face with Rong Huan Xian. Then I will. He jumped high up. Directly his sword slashed out, kill you. 6 flashes of sword chi appeared in a dance towards him. This slash was lithe and graceful, and had completely exceeded Rong Huan Xian's imagination. How could it have possibly circled around a second-tier bronze-armored corpse and appeared right in front of him? When he snapped out of it, that sword together with the might of 6 flashes of sword chi had appeared right in front of him. One had to understand that although Ling Han appeared to be only in the first layer of element-gathering tier, his real ability was on the level of the first layer of gushing spring tier. Moreover, his battle prowess was even a few more battle stars above that. How could his attack be so easily blocked by a mere second-tier bronze-armored corpse? Rong Huan Xian had paid the price for his underestimation of Ling Han. But he was also a person who had crawled out of desperate straits and had a formidable will of his own. In the face of danger, he had instead become extremely calm. He suddenly opened his mouth and released a shrill whistle. Wong, wong, wong. He actually sprayed out a puff of black smoke from his mouth, which transformed into an ancient letter that blocked the power of the slash, as if it had transformed into a shield. Pong! The might of the sword had reached its target, yet it continued to release muffled sounds, as it was actually being melted by that black smoke. However, that ancient letter was also disappearing slowly. By the time the sword chi was completely destroyed, that ancient letter also swiftly vanished. Ronghuan Xian had already retreated 30 feet away. A faint flush had appeared on his face, and he looked a little bit more healthier than before, but the killing intent in his eyes was also considerably stronger, as if he wanted to swallow Ling Han whole. Source Corpse Chi? Ling Han gave a flourish of his sword, and said with a little bit of pity, I never thought that a mere martial artist in the 5th layer of Gushing Spring tier like you would have managed to form Source Corpse Chi. Otherwise, he would have used the 3 styles of black origin rather than attacking so casually like he had done just now. You even know about Source Corpse Chi? Ronghuan Xian appeared to be extremely shocked. Ling Han had guessed that he was the heir to the 1,000 Corpse sect through the appearance of the bronze-armored corpse. This was still easy to accept, because the 1,000 Corpse sect had been very well known in the past, so they must have left behind a considerable amount of inheritance. However, Source Corpse Chi. This was the secret technique of the 1,000 Corpse sect. If it was not someone who was extremely familiar with the 1,000 Corpse sect, there was no way he would know about it. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, You are already about to die anyways, so what's the point of spouting so much nonsense? Ronghuan Xian looked enraged at this. He was an elite in the 5th layer of Gushing Spring tier. He had only fallen to Ling Han's attack previously because he had not expected that Ling Han would be so powerful, so how could he possibly make the same mistake a second time? You are indeed a bit strange. You are obviously in the 1st layer of Element Gathering tier, yet your ability is comparable to the 1st layer of the Gushing Spring tier. He nodded in admission, then smirked coldly. But I am in the 5th layer of Gushing Spring tier, and it would be extremely easy for me to subdue you. Is that so? When Ling Han had been in the 4th layer of Element Gathering tier, he had not cowered in front of an elite of the 1st layer of Gushing Spring tier. Now that he was in the 10th layer of Element Gathering tier, he would naturally not fear a battle with an opponent in the 5th layer of Gushing Spring tier. Since a 2nd-tier bronze-armored corpse can do nothing against you, then what about a 3rd-tiered one? Ronghuan Xian laughed. He pulled sharply with his right hand. Chong, chong, chong. The crisp sound of chains was heard, as if something heavy was being dragged out, and shockingly, there appeared 3 copper coffins. 3 corpses? Ling Han's eyes turned apprehensive, and he could not help but frown. I've never thought you'd actually manage to cultivate 3 corpses. Every disciple of the 1,000 Corpse sect used corpse soldiers as their main weapon, and in theory, the more corpse soldiers one had, the better it was. But in truth, there was a limited number of corpse soldiers that could be controlled by every disciple. Because after the corpse soldier had been successfully refined, it was equivalent to having obtained a second life. Though it was only left with bloodthirsty instincts, it was also violent and vicious, so how could it be willing to remain under the control of another? The disciples of the 1,000 Corpse sect needed to use their Source Corpse Chi to control the corpse soldiers, but it was extremely difficult to form Source Corpse Chi. Thus, there was of course a limit to the number of corpse soldiers one could control. Ordinarily, those in Element Gathering tier could only control 1, those in Gushing Spring tier could control 2, and only when one reached Spiritual Ocean tier could he control 3. Ronghuan Xian was only in the 5th layer of Gushing Spring tier, yet he had somehow cultivated 3 corpse soldiers. This was extremely strange. Ling Han was shocked, and Ronghuan Xian was even more astonished, because Ling Han was even aware of the limitations of cultivating corpse soldiers. The reason why he could cultivate 3 corpses was because he had obtained the whole inheritance of the 1,000 Corpse sect, which included a prize treasure. This was what allowed him to cultivate an additional corpse soldier in Gushing Spring tier, and as his cultivation level advanced, the number of corpse soldiers he would be able to control would increase further and further, and be double the number any ordinary disciple of 1,000 Corpse sect would be capable of controlling. He humphed and declared, "You are extremely strange, and I must eliminate you." He clapped a hand onto the copper coffin in the middle, and pong! The lid of the coffin was instantly flung away as yet another corpse soldier leaped out of the coffin. "Third-tier bronze-armored corpse," he declared haughtily. Chapter 223. Chapter 223, Silver-Armored Corpse. Reverie _ Ling Han looked at the third-tier bronze-armored corpse, frowning slightly. He might not be able to defeat a third-tier bronze-armored corpse, but it wouldn't be able to kill him either. The key was that his opponent was pulling on 3 caskets. In other words, there was still one corpse soldier that didn't appear. Another bronze-armored corpse, or a silver-armored corpse. Even a first-tier silver-armored corpse was equivalent to a spiritual ocean-tier cultivator. Ling Han was freakishly strong, but not so to the degree of being able to fight a spiritual ocean-tier head-on with brute force. Besides, corpse soldiers did not fear death nor being hurt, and unless their head was blown up, they'd never lose their battle capability, making them extremely hard to deal with. More importantly, corpse soldiers came from refinement. During this process, a corpse soldier's body became extremely durable, comparable to cast metal materials of the same tier. How would he break through it? Thus, to completely kill a corpse soldier, one needed to surpass the corpse by an entire tier to shatter it completely through overwhelming power. Ling Han's power right now was equivalent to the first layer of the gushing spring tier, insufficient to take care of even a third-tier bronze-armored corpse, not to mention a silver-armored corpse. Besides, even if he could instantly kill Rong Huanxian, corpse soldiers wouldn't die because the puppeteer was dead. On the contrary, they'd break away from control and kill based on their instincts. However, Rong Huanxian was in the 5th layer of the gushing spring tier, not easy to kill anyway. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "Inside your 3rd casket, don't tell me there's a silver-armored corpse?" Instantly, Rong Huanxian's expression changed slightly, and he sneered as he said, "You know quite a bit about the Thousand Corpse sect." Ling Han said no more and immediately bolted, grabbing Hun Yo with the left hand and carrying Yang Ming in the right hand. Xiao. In an instant they turned into a small black dot. Sure enough, there was a silver-armored corpsito hell with fighting. "Ah!" Rong Huanxian was dumbfounded, then let out a sky-shaking angry roar. He completely didn't expect Ling Han to run so decisively. Good for nothing. Good for nothing. He yelled at the 2 corpse soldiers in anger. However, corpse soldiers would only commence battle after he gave them the command to. Otherwise, if they had their own intentions, they'd probably kill him first and eat his flesh and blood completely. Humph. After a while, he settled down and said to himself, "It's nothing. That guy will definitely go to the central hall. I'll kill everyone there, and my 3 corpse soldiers will all level up. I hear that there are blood zombies here. Their battle power is comparable to flower blossom tier cultivators. If I can get 3 of those, hee. The blood zombie only appears when the blood sacrifice is insufficient. If I kill everyone in the central hall, then the blood zombie will definitely appear. Ha ha, ha 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 ha." He kept laughing maniacally. Only after Ling Han ran nearly 50 kilometers at a stretch did he stop, offhandedly throwing Yang Ming to the side and placing Hun Yo down. Yang Ming was probably never treated in such a rough way. The veins on his neck popped out, and he made a furious face. But as he thought about the difference in strength between him and Ling Han, he immediately suppressed his anger. "Young Master Han, the ravine is right ahead. Let's go," he said impatiently. Ling Han nodded. His dantian was unusually large after he ran 50 kilometers at a stretch. He only used up nearly 10% of his origin power, which could be quickly recovered by taking a 2nd-level return origin pill. If people were to see it, they'd definitely scold him for squandering money. Return origin pills were definitely used during battle, because normally one would meditate to recover origin power, and where would one get the time to do that during a battle? Ling Han was overbearingly rich and least lacking in medicinal pills, eating them casually. They were certainly closer to the ravine. In a few minutes at most, they'd be able to walk to the entrance. Ling Han. From afar, someone waved at them, and quite a few people were there. After a close look, it was Qi Yongyi and the others. Ling Han sped up his footsteps as he walked over, only to see that other than Li Si-chan, Guang Yuan, and Li Hao and his partner, everyone who journeyed together earlier was here. Who is this? They looked at Yang Ming. This humble one is Yang Ming, no one important. Yang Ming hurriedly paid obeisance to the others, acting very humbly. However, when his eyes swept past Lu Yutong, a breathtaking expression flashed across his face, and he couldn't help but look twice more, finally lowering his head. This isn't a place to talk. We go in first, Ling Han said seriously. Rong Huanxian could appear from behind at any time. Rong Huanxian himself wasn't a big deal, but the key was that he brought a silver-armored corpse. In a place where spiritual ocean-tier cultivators ruled, the silver-armored corpse was almost an invincible being. Everyone saw his solemn expression and none opposed, as they were all waiting for Ling Han to arrive anyways. Since the man of the hour arrived, why not leave? On the way, Ling Han explained the incident regarding Rong Huanxian. Hearing it, everyone's hair stood up. Corpse soldier? They've never heard of it. What the hell was that? The blood zombies here, could they be corpse soldiers? Bailey Tengyun guessed. Possibly. The others nodded in succession. This would explain why Rong Huanxian appeared. Perhaps there was 1,000 corpse sects inheritance here, and Rong Huanxian was here to take it. An inheritance like that, even if it's god tier, I wouldn't want it. Li Dongyu shook his head like a rattle drum. The others also shook their heads in succession. Nurturing a corpse, just the thought of it gave them goosebumps. If they were really to enjoy its company day and night, it was possible they'd puke themselves to death. Guang Yuan still hasn't arrived? Ling Han frowned. The only person by his side that could go against a silver-armored corpse was Guang Yuan, and without that old fellow blocking in front, whoever encountered the silver-armored corpse would only get shredded to pieces. A silver-armored corpse needed a spiritual ocean tier's body to evolve, so they didn't even qualify as food. Senior Guang Yuan was teleported near another ravine. Lu Yutong said with a bit of regret the spiritual ocean tier was the strongest force here. With Guang Yuan here, they would be a lot safer. Forget it. Let's go. On the way, Yang Ming became livelier after he grasped everyone's situation, calling others brothers. However, he never leaked his identity, and no one was suspicious of him because of Ling Han. This ravine looked like a stretch of sky from afar, but when actually walking inside, one would definitely be shocked by the ravine's scale, 50 kilometers long and around 1 kilometer in width, not to mention straight through and through, just as if cut by a sharp weapon. No single place was even a bit wider or a bit narrower. Several hundred kilometers was naturally no big deal for martial artists in element gathering tier. After a long period of time, they walked past the long ravine, and a majestic hall appeared ahead. At the first sight of the large hall, everyone revealed a shocked expression, for the edifice was floating in the air, connected to rows of stairs that were floating as well. An impressive spectacle indeed. So magical. Chapter 224. Chapter 224. A magnificent turn. Reverie _ What a magical formation. As a former heaven tier cultivator, Ling Han's interest was naturally placed on something else than the others. The others were just shocked by this magical scene, but he found why the palace hall was floating. Right below the hall was an empty public square, but this plain-looking square was not so simple. Vein-like lines formed an intriguing pattern with indistinct flashes of light on it. Another look at the bottom of the palace. There were also corresponding vein-like lines shining faintly there. Ling Han was amazed by it. Though he has seen many formations that were used for either defense or attack, very few were of the anti-gravity type. This certainly looked grand, but for martial artists, this had no practical use. This was the central hall. Behind the large hall was a thick forest. They came just in time to see someone's silhouette disappear into the forest. Let's first go to the central hall to offer blood, Qi Yongyi said. He counted as half royalty and didn't wish for a calamity to occur in Rain Country in the least. This was the common view of those with a vested interest. Everyone nodded. If a blood zombie really appeared, it would benefit no one. They walked up the stairs, where there were many people from not only Rain Country, but also rock country and fire country. The 9 countries had an unwritten rule, which was that fights were prohibited in the central hall. Letting the blood sacrifice go smoothly was of mutual benefit to the 9 large countries. Whoever broke this rule would become the public enemy of the 9 countries. Because the mystery realm opened again after more than 300 years, everyone here naturally came for the first time, and while walking on the steps, they cried out in surprise. Many people only moved a step after a long while, shocked by the nature-defying construct. Climbing step by step, their feet were suspended in midair by the steps underneath. As they got higher, they naturally felt unease, but also became excited because who else other than flower blossom tear cultivators could fly amid heaven and earth? Although it didn't count as flying, it was roughly the same feeling. Standing on top of the highest heavens and passing judgment on everything. Ling Han was also a bit overwhelmed by emotions. It was no wonder a formation like this was created through painstaking effort, as it certainly felt more satisfying. To arrange such a large formation, the materials necessary also had to be extremely precious. Small countries like Rain Country and Fire Country couldn't make it even if they used the entire country's power. There was a total of 3,333 steps, yet it took them nearly half an hour to walk to their end. First, they were walking and gazing because it was so shocking, and second, there were too many people on the steps, so squeezing through all the way wasn't easy. The large hall finally appeared in front of them. This was a building without 4 sidewalls and with a total of 12 massive stone columns supporting the ceiling. Each stone column was nearly 333 meters tall, making this large hall appear extremely grand. "Young master! Young master!" A voice filled with surprise was heard. 3 people squeezed out from the crowd, headed by a 60-year-old man with a relatively strong presence. "Uncle Fu." Yang Ming's eyes lit up. He instantly revealed a joyful expression and hurriedly greeted them. "Young master, are you all right?" The 3 were all nervously looking at Yang Ming. This was Ao family's young master. If anything were to happen, they would definitely have to pay with their lives. "I'm fine." Yang Ming smiled slightly and turned around. His temperament changed drastically all of a sudden. Although he was hitting it up with the others before, he looked like an underling. Now he was filled with grace of a person with high status, just like an ugly duckling suddenly turned into a beautiful swan. "Everyone, please allow me to introduce myself again." His eyes swept past everyone. "My family name is Ao, and first name is Yang Ming. I'm a direct disciple of Winter Moon Sect." Winter Moon Sect. In the vast lands, sects and countries could not be randomly established. With only a spiritual ocean tier cultivator to oversee things, an organization could only be called a faction. With a spiritual pedestal tier cultivator overseeing things, a country could be established, and a sect needed an even higher tier. At the very least, a flower blossom tier cultivator had to keep watch over it. Winter Moon Sect was the closest sect near the 9 nations of the desolate north. It was rumored that a formidable spiritual infant tier cultivator watched over Idavan. The 9 nations of the desolate north needed to be respectful of it, for if Winter Moon Sect got displeased, dispatching a random flower blossom tier cultivator could sweep across a single country. And if a spiritual infant tier cultivator personally stepped forth, even the reclusive flower blossom tier cultivators of the 9 nations fighting together would only be put down in the end. The higher the tier, the greater the difference a tier, or even half a small tier made, not to mention a large tier's difference. Qi Yongyi and the others were shocked. Being a direct disciple meant that Ao Yang Ming's status in Winter Moon Sect was even nobler than that of the eldest prince and the 3rd prince. It was no wonder he kept his identity secret on the way. He must have been afraid that after it was exposed, people would covet the arts and skills he cultivated. Skills passed by Winter Moon Sect. Just how precious was that? Now, Ao Yang Ming had his family's protection and naturally had no more qualms. Surname Ao? Winter Moon Sect? A coldness flashed by in Ling Han's gaze. Could this guy have any relations with Ao Feng? According to Ling Dongxing, Ao Feng was distinguished and lived an unconventional lifestyle with countless illegitimate children, and because of that, his mother fled the marriage. If one were to say that the person in front of him was Ao Feng's love child, then that was completely possible. He of course wouldn't be impudent and directly ask him. He just showed a faint smile. Qi Yongyi and the others promptly paid obeisance. This was a large sect's direct discipline. It was all right even if they couldn't be friends, but they definitely couldn't have a big argument. Otherwise, it could bring their own families a disaster. Ao Yangming was expectedly arrogant, placing his attitude extremely high. Except when he looked at Lu Yutong. His gaze became gentle, and he said, "Lady Yutong, do you have any interest in joining Winter Moon sect?" Joining Winter Moon sect? Everyone was shocked, revealing an envious expression. Moonwinter sect, joining such a sect could give one the chance to step into spiritual pedestal or flower blossom tier, maybe even spiritual infant tier. Of course, just by the looks of Ao Yangming inviting only Lu Yutong, one would know what sort of idea this guy had planned. Undoubtedly, Lu Yutong was one of the two most beautiful in the imperial city, beautiful like an angel. It was not surprising that Ao Yangming fell for her. No. Lu Yutong declined without thinking at all. She knew that Ao Yangming fancied her good looks, but even if he really valued her natural aptitude, she wouldn't agree. Firstly, what sort of art was she cultivating? Heaven tier? Would Winter Moon sect give her heaven tier art to cultivate? Putting aside whether they had it or not, even if they had it, they wouldn't easily pass it on to outsiders. Secondly, following Ling Han, she didn't need to worry about medicinal pills. That guy was not far from becoming an earth-grade alchemist. Thirdly, and most importantly, she was not willing to leave Ling Han. With the third condition, it was enough to overturn everything. Ao Yangming was originally certain that Lu Yutong would agree, but never did he expect her to reject it so straightforwardly. It turned his expression instantly into an awkward one. He looked at Ling Han and revealed a sneering smile from the corner of his lips. On the way, he obviously saw that Lu Yutong had feelings for Ling Han. Then he'd first have to trample on Ling Han to show that the latter was worthless. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.